desert dust tastes like being betrayed. A young man is thrown deep into the earth, where it is dark and hot in a dry cistern. His world, which used to be full of color and hope, has been violently shrunk to a circle of mocking sky far above. He is Joseph, his father's favorite son. But in this hole, he is just a problem solved and an obstacle removed. His own brothers, whose faces have hardened from years of jealousy, are silhouetted against the unforgiving sun. The beautiful coat of many colors that stood for their anger is ripped off his shoulders. They saw it as a sign of their arrogance, a constant reminder of how much lower they were than everyone else. It was a gift made with threads of paternal love. Soon, this tapestry of love and dreams will be ripped apart and stained with an animal's blood. This is a cruel lie that will be shown to a grieving father. A lie meant to hide a truth they could no longer bear. Joseph is taken out of one dark place and sold into another. Slavery. He is chained and tied up and led to Egypt, a land of strange gods and tall monuments. He is a pawn in a deal involving silver and spite. But even though the caravan is slowly making its way across the endless sands, a silent, invisible hand is weaving a bigger story. One day the boy who was thrown down would stand in front of the most powerful man on earth. The dreamer, who had visions that got him into this pit, would be called to help a king figure out his bad dreams. This is the story of one man's journey from a lonely well to the right hand of Pharaoh. It shows how even the worst betrayals can lead to an impossible destiny. But before we can understand how he got to where he is now, we need to look back at the family that loved and hated him and the thing that made him jealous in the first place. Before a boy is thrown into a pit, a family is dug out first. Its walls are made of love and lies, and its walls are made of competition and desire. We need to know the house before we can understand the pit. Jacob's house was not a peaceful place. It was a world of conflicting feelings, like two suns pulling everything out of orbit. There were two sisters, Leah and Rachel, at the center of it all. They were both married to the same man, but their love for him kept them apart. Rachel, the younger, more beautiful woman, had stolen Jacob's heart. He worked for her for 7 years, but it felt like only a few days to him because he loved her so much. But on the night of his wedding, he was tricked. When he woke up, he found not his beloved Rachel, but her older sister Leah, who had weak eyes and an unchosen heart. A week later, Jacob got Rachel, but he had to work for 7 more years to get her. He had his love, but his family's base was now broken. He had 2 wives, but he only loved one of them. This one unchanging love for Rachel became the family's silent grinding stone. Leah, the wife by trickery, spent her days in the shadow of her sister's beauty, always wishing for a look of love that was always directed somewhere else. And in this dry land of unrequited love, a bitter and desperate rivalry began to grow. It was a war fought not with swords, but in the birthing tent. God saw Leah's pain and how lonely she was as the unloved wife, so he opened her womb. She had a son named Reuben, and in his name was a desperate hope. The Lord has seen my misery. Surely my husband will love me now. But Jacob's heart did not change. She had another child, Simeon, and said, "Because the Lord heard that I am not loved, he gave me this one too." Then came Levi, and with him another weak prayer. "Now at last my husband will love me." Finally she had Judah, this time not asking for her husband's love but praising God. 4 sons, 4 reminders of a wife's broken heart. Rachel, the one who was loved, watched all of this with a deep sense of envy. Her husband loved her, but her womb was still a barren desert. In her desperation, she yelled at Jacob, "Give me children or I'll die." It was a cry from the depths of her soul, the pain of a woman who had everything but the one thing she wanted most. She followed the customs of the time and gave Jacob her servant Bilhah to have children for her. Rachel said that Dan and Naphtali were her own victories in her proxy war with Leah. Leah, who had stopped having children for a while, gave Jacob her own handmaiden Zilpah so she wouldn't be outdone. Gad and Asher came from her. The family grew, son after son, but they weren't all getting along. There were groups forming, and their mothers were the ones who decided who was in what group. 10 sons now called Jacob father. Each one was a living reminder of how deeply and painfully his 2 Wives were apart, after years of silence and watching her sister, and their handmaidens build a nation from their wombs. God remembered Rachel. He opened her womb after he heard her. Finally, she had a son of her own flesh and blood. She gave him the name Joseph. The name means may he add, which is a prayer for another son, but it was also a statement. This wasn't just another kid. This was Rachel's son, the son of true love, and the long-awaited heir of the favored wife. Joseph was a miracle in his father's eyes. He was a treasure that came from the woman he had loved since the first time he saw her. Joseph was woven into this complicated tapestry of jealousy, duty, and long-standing competition. He was a bright thread, a child with a lot of potential. But a love that is so bright and focused leaves long, dark shadows. And 10 older brothers watched from the shadows, their hearts already learning the bitter math of favoritism. A father's love should be a stronghold, a safe place for all of his children. But what happens when one person builds the walls higher than everyone else? What happens when love, which is supposed to bring people together, becomes the thing that tears them apart? In Jacob's huge camp, where there was dust and the sound of sheep bleating, a love grew that was so bright and focused that it cast 10 other sons into a cold and bitter shadow. Jacob loved Joseph like this. He fell in love late in life, and the timing made it seem even more special. But its roots went deeper, into the soil of sadness and memories. Rachel was Jacob's wife and the love of his life. Joseph was their first child. Joseph became a living memorial to Rachel when she was gone. Jacob saw his mother's grace in the way the boy walked. He saw the ghost of her smile in his bright, smart eyes. Jacob loved Joseph because it meant keeping Rachel alive. To honor him was to remember her. Everyone knew about this deep, sad love. It was a daily reality, a clear presence in the family, as clear and undeniable as the sun rising. And his other sons, the ones he didn't love as much, Leah's sons and the handmaiden's sons, saw it all. They could tell by the way their father spoke to Joseph and the shortness of his words to them that he was angry. They saw it in the way he looked at his youngest child for a long time, a look they had never gotten. Then came the day when this unspoken preference was spoken, and this hidden hierarchy became shockingly clear. Jacob called Joseph to him and gave him a gift. It was a coat. But this tunic wasn't the rough, practical one that a shepherd would wear, stained with dirt and lanolin from sheep. This was something completely different. The ancient Hebrew word for it is ketonet pasim, which has a lot of meaning. It suggests not just a patchwork of colors, but a unique outfit. An ornate robe with long sleeves that reached the palms and a hem that swept the ankles. This coat spoke a language that could get you in trouble. The long sleeves made it impossible for a shepherd to do his hard work. It was the clothes of a manager, a prince, or a man who didn't have to work with his hands. It was a uniform for both fun and power. The colors were a statement in and of themselves. We can picture threads that are dyed in the deep indigo of the sky at dusk, the bright saffron of desert flowers, and the rich crimson of crushed pomegranates. It was a tapestry of intention that you could wear, a public declaration made from Jacob's unique love. Jacob gave Joseph this coat to prepare him for a different future than his brothers. He was giving him a future that they couldn't share. The fragile peace of the family was broken as soon as Joseph stepped outside into the sun, wearing this sign of favor. This wasn't just a coat for his 10 older brothers. It was the last piece of proof that they were lower than everyone else. It was a sign that their father didn't want them, and it was a cruel joke about all the hard work they had done in the hot fields for years. It was an unbearable sight for Reuben, the firstborn. It was a visual theft of a birthright that was already tarnished. For Leah's tough and hardened sons, it was like pouring salt on the wound of being the child of an unloved wife for the rest of their lives. Their simmering anger, which had been a private and unspoken bitterness, now had a target. Their jealousy, which had been a vague and shadowy feeling, now had a name, a shape, and a color. The scriptures say that when they saw it, they hated him and could not speak a peaceful word to him. The language of brotherhood died. Conversations got short and cold. Instead, a threatening silence grew, broken only by angry looks and whispered plots. Every time they saw the bright threads of that coat moving through the camp, it hurt them again. It was a constant reminder that they were second best in their father's heart. The piece of clothing that was supposed to be a sign of love had turned into a declaration of war. It split the family in two, putting a big gap between the one who was liked and the many who were angry. Jacob's son thought the beautiful coat said something about him. But soon, Joseph would say something much more shocking, something that came not from earthly threads, but from the strange fabric of the night. A dream is a private world, like a quiet theater for the soul. But what happens when that world speaks? When the delicate fabric of a vision is exposed to the harsh light of day, it can either light it up or burn it down. Joseph's 17 years had been mostly spent in the safety of his father's love, which was a fortress for him, but a challenge for his brothers. The jealousy was already real. They could all feel it in the spaces between them, like a hot feeling. A spark was about to be thrown into that unstable air. "Listen," he said, his voice full of the fresh memory of the night. "Listen to this dream I have dreamed." It started like so many other important things do, with a simple statement at the family gathering. The harvest was the work of their hands and the rhythm of their lives. The dry land needed work and sweat, and the reward was golden sheaves of grain, tied up and standing up in the field as proof of a season's work. The heavens took this familiar, down-to-earth reality for Joseph's vision. He used words to paint the picture for them. He talked about the sun beating down on them, the familiar pain in their backs, and the sound of dry wheat rustling as they gathered the earth's bounty. "We were all in the field," he said, his eyes wide with amazement, binding sheaves together. In this way, they were all equal, brothers working together on the same task. But then the dream changed. The normal became deep. And behold, Joseph went on, his words coming out in a childlike excitement he couldn't hold back. "My sheaf arose, and it also stood upright." He was talking about a vision of not just standing, but of being the best. His sheaf didn't just sit with the others, it rose. It became the center of attention, a lone pillar in the middle of the sun-drenched field. And then came the moment that would change their family's geography forever. "And then your sheaves," he said, looking from one hardened face to the next. "Your sheaves gathered around, and they bowed down to my sheaf." It was a simple image, a story told in stalks of gold, but its meaning was as clear and sharp as a shard of glass. It was a silent surrender dance, like a coronation for farmers. There was no doubt. There was no need for an experienced interpreter. In the past, dreams were not just idle fantasies. They were messages from God and a look at how things would be in the future. The brothers, who were used to this kind of thing, didn't see Joseph's dream as a story for kids, but as a statement. A prediction, a political statement. The silence that came after he told was heavy, full of shock that quickly turned to anger. A vision had attacked the unspoken order of age and birthright that was the basis of their family structure. Their anger made the air crackle. Simeon, Levi, Reuben, Judah, and all the others who had been angry about how much attention this younger brother got now saw their anger take on a terrifying new form. It wasn't just about the coat anymore. That was a sign of approval. This was a claim to power. This was a vision of how they would be made to submit. The first person to speak broke the spell with a voice full of anger and sarcasm. "Will you really rule over us? Will you really have power over us?" The question was not a question. It was a charge. They didn't see an innocent dreamer. They saw a budding tyrant, an arrogant boy who thought the universe was working against him to put him on a throne above them. A father's preference had planted the seed of hatred long ago, and now a son's ambition was watering it. They hated him for the dream, but they hated him even more for telling it and having the guts to make it come true. The gap between Joseph and his brothers, which was already deep, had just become a canyon. But this was just the start. The harvest had told the earth what it needed to know, but the heavens had not yet said their piece. And another dream was already forming in Joseph's soul, one that would go far beyond a field of grain. There were threats in the silence after Joseph's first dream. But a vision that was much bigger and much more dangerous was about to break that silence. It seems that the young man's dreams were still flowing. Joseph chose not to be cautious, maybe because he was young and naive, or maybe because he felt like he had to do what God wanted him to do. He spoke again, this time revealing a second nighttime vision that would turn a family feud into a cold-blooded plot. This time, the dream did not come from the dusty ground of the grain fields. It came down from the sky. The stage wasn't a harvest. It was the huge, quiet canvas of the universe itself. "Listen," he said in a serious tone, "I have dreamed another dream." He saw the sun, a beautiful ball of paternal fire. He saw the moon, which was a silver light that reminded him of his mother. He also saw 11 stars, bright and clear, that made up ancient constellations in the night sky. And in this heavenly theater, he saw the impossible happen. All of the heavenly court, including the sun, the moon, and the 11 stars, bowed down to him. They fell to their knees in front of his one bright light. This was a statement of superiority, while the first dream was a hint of leadership. It was a bold and shocking claim that went beyond the bonds of brotherhood and changed the very structure of the family and the basic order of creation. The sheaves of grain were one thing. They were friends. But what about the moon and the sun? This was the language of the dynasty, the highest power. The brothers' simmering anger turned into a furious, white-hot hatred. This was no longer just the talk of a spoiled child. This sounded like unbearable arrogance to them. Joseph, their younger brother, was hiding his desire for power behind the holy language of divine visions. He didn't just want to be in charge. He thought about how his own parents would bow down to him. They could see and touch the coat of many colors, which was a sign of favoritism. But these dreams were an invisible crown he was putting on his own head, a claim to a future that made them all less than him. Their jealousy, which used to be a private hurt, grew into a public and shared hatred. They couldn't even talk to him nicely anymore. Every word was a fight against the disdain that now colored their view of him. Jacob, who loved Joseph more than any of his other sons, couldn't let this go. The patriarch, who had once dreamed of a ladder to heaven, was now faced with a dream that seemed to go against the rules of both heaven and earth. He scolded his son, his voice sharp with a mix of fatherly correction and real shock. "What is this dream that you have dreamed?" he asked. The question hung in the thick, tense air. "Should I, your mother, and your brothers really come to bow down to you?" This was a public dressing down, an attempt to clip the wings of this high-flying vision and bring some peace back to his broken family. There was, however, a hint of something else behind the scolding. The Bible says that Jacob kept the matter in mind while his brothers were jealous. He was a man who knew how to read the strange language of God. He understood that God often spoke in the quiet theater of the mind while the world slept. He had built his life on the dream he had at Bethel. So, even though his lips said what a practical father would say to stop a rebellion, his heart, the heart of a patriarch, held on to the words. He put them away, thinking about how heavy they were and how scary and bright they could be. He scolded the messenger for being so bold, but he couldn't ignore the message's possible power. The dream had been said. It couldn't be missed. It came down on the family camp like a prophecy, separating father from son and brother from brother. For the 10 older sons, it was the last proof that their worst fears had come true. It was the end of the line. There was now too much space between them and Joseph for a father's love or family ties to fill. The question was no longer if their anger would show up, but when. All they needed was a chance to get back at someone, and the vast empty fields of the north were about to give it to them. A simple task can often change the course of history. For Jacob, who lived in the valley of Hebron, it was just a matter of being a good father. His 10 older sons were tending the flocks in the rich pastures of Shechem, which was a journey of several days. Being a shepherd meant living alone and taking risks. In a world where communication was slow, silence was a blank canvas for a father to paint his deepest fears. He called for his beloved Joseph, the son of his old age, and gave him a mission out of love. "Go and see if your brothers and the flocks are okay, and then come back and tell me." It was a simple request, a way to stay in touch across a long distance. Joseph, who was 17 and full of the innocent trust of youth, said right away, "Here I am." He was a good son doing a task he was used to, but he had no idea he was walking toward a cliff he couldn't see. The trip north was long and hard. Joseph walked alone through the rough hills of Canaan for almost 50 miles. He got to Shechem and looked around at the hills and fields he knew so well, but he couldn't find his brothers. The huge emptiness must have been scary. A stranger found him as he walked through the fields. This person is a forgotten character in the story who serves as a very important, almost divine, guidepost.
What do you want?
The man asked. Joseph said, I'm looking for my brothers. Please tell me where they are feeding the flock. The man pointed him further north. He said, they have left this place when I heard them say, let's go to Dothan. That's another 15 miles. Joseph could have gone back. He could have gone back to his father and told him that his brothers had moved on. But he knew what he had to do. He kept going, and his determination led him deeper into the storm that was gathering against him. Dothan. The name meant two wells. It was on the Via Maris, an important trade route that connected the empires of Egypt and Mesopotamia. It was a place to pass through, a place to do business, and a place where you could buy and sell your future. That bright, unmistakable coat of many colors announced Joseph's arrival long before his face was visible on the horizon. For the brothers, who were resting with their flocks, this was not the arrival of a sibling, but the approach of an enemy. The years of jealousy that had been building up inside of her, along with the painful memory of those arrogant dreams of the sun, moon, and bowing sheaves, all came out at once. The anger that had been building up turned into a murderous rage. They didn't say, here comes Joseph, or here is our brother. Instead, they sneered, behold, this dreamer comes. To them, he was no longer family. He was a title, a problem, and an abstract source of their shame that had now conveniently come to them. The conspiracy came together very quickly. Come now, one said to another. The words were probably a poisonous whisper that spread like fire through their ranks. Let's kill him and throw him into one of the pits. Then we can say that a fierce animal ate him, and we'll see what happens to his dreams. This plan came from more than just hate. It came from a desperate need to silence a future they didn't want to accept. They wouldn't just kill him, they would also kill his dreams, showing themselves, the world, and maybe even God, that this boy's fate was nothing but dust. But Reuben, the firstborn, heard the whispers. He had a terrible duty to fulfill. He was the oldest, and would have to answer to Jacob in the end. He felt the same way they did, but his conscience, or maybe his fear, kept him from killing his brother. He knew that reason wouldn't stop their anger, so he tried to change its course. Don't kill him, he said, giving them a clever choice. Don't kill him. Just throw him into this pit in the woods. Don't touch him. His words were a dark compromise that played on their desire to kill Joseph while secretly planting the seed of his own plan. To come back later, alone, and save the boy and bring him back to their father. The brothers agreed because they saw a way to get rid of Joseph without feeling guilty about killing him. As Joseph got closer, his heart probably filled with relief at finally finding them, but instead of being welcomed, he was met with violence. They surrounded him, their faces twisted into masks of hatred. They ripped the ornate coat off his shoulders in one quick, violent motion. It was a sign of his father's love and their own feelings of worthlessness. They ripped it off, which was a very real way of taking away his status, identity, and protection. After that, they pulled him to the mouth of an empty cistern, which is a deep, dark hole in the ground that collects rainwater. They threw him in without saying anything else. The world changed for Joseph from the bright sun of Dothan to the dark, suffocating earth. He was alone and left at the bottom of a well, where he could only see a circle of light far above that made fun of him. His brothers had made their decision. They put their things together, finished their terrible work, and sat down to eat above him. But Reuben's plan was weak, and Dothan was a crossroads. A cloud of dust was rising in the distance, signaling an approach that would ruin all of their plans, and set in motion a fate that none of them could have imagined. A pit's silence has its own sound. It is the soft sound of your own breathing, the frantic beating of your heart against your ribs, and the whisper of dust settling on despair. This dry cistern wasn't just a prison for Joseph. It was a tomb for the living, a forgotten part of the earth where brotherly love had been officially declared dead. The only way to see the world that had kicked him out in an instant was through a perfect circle of blue sky above him. His brothers' voices, muffled by the stone and dirt, were a torture. They were the sounds of life going on without him, made by the same men who shared his father's blood. They had taken off his coat, which was a violent act that took away his identity and honor. Now they were sitting in the sun, breaking bread together. Their meal was a horrible symbol of their shared hatred. While Joseph was stuck in the dark, they fed themselves, trying to satisfy a hunger that had nothing to do with food and everything to do with a bitterness that had been growing for years. But Providence was about to step in, even though it often writes its straightest lines with the most crooked tools of human will. A cloud of dust appeared on the horizon, a dark spot against the sky that slowly turned into the lumbering shapes of a camel train. It was a caravan of Ishmaelites who were distant cousins of Abraham's family. Their camels were carrying the fragrant treasures of Gilead, spices, balm, and myrrh, to Egypt's never-ending markets. For the brothers, this was just a chance meeting that turned into a good business deal. To the quiet architect of history, it was the arrival of an unlikely chariot, not to save a prince, but to take a slave to his unlikely throne. Judah was the first to see the grim logic. Reuben, the oldest, who had secretly planned to save Joseph, was not there. The other people were still angry and wanted to kill him. But Judah, whose name means praise, didn't speak with righteousness. He spoke with a cold, hard reality. He thought, "What good is it to kill our brother and hide his blood? Do not touch him, for he is our brother, our own flesh." It was a mercy born not of love, but of money. It was a secret that a brother had died. Selling a brother was a way to make money, and even if only a little, ease one's conscience. How often are our own better choices still based on what we want, not what's right? The choice was made. The rope was lowered not to save someone, but to make a deal. Joseph was pulled out of the dark and into the bright sun. He blinked and looked confused as he stood in front of his captors and buyers. He was no longer a brother or a son. He was a product. The haggling didn't last long, and the deal was made with the cold finality of business. The sound of silver coins clinking together sealed the deal as the traders handed over coins to their eager brothers. 20 shekels of silver was the going rate for a young slave, and that was the price of a human soul, the value of their father's most beloved son. He was tied up, had his hands tied, had his future erased, and was taken away to the caravan, where he was a piece of living property. Now, they had to put on the last act of their betrayal. The brothers, who had a lot of silver in their pockets, were left with the beautiful empty coat. The coat, which had once been a symbol of a father's love, was now going to be a work of art in lies. They killed a young goat, which was a life they had sold to hide. They dipped the beautiful dress into the warm, fresh blood and watched with grim satisfaction as the red stain seeped into the threads that spoke of favor, turning a symbol of love into a symbol of fake tragedy. They started the long trip home, going over their sadness and perfecting their lie. They walked up to their father Jacob's camp with fake, worried looks on their faces. They showed the ruined tunic, which was the evidence they had worked so hard to get ready. Their words were like a knife wrapped in a question of supposed ignorance. "This we have found. Please let me know if this is your son's tunic or not." Jacob knew right away. He would never forget the pattern and colors, which were now ruined. The end was quick and certain. A beast had found him. A predator had ripped his beloved Joseph to shreds. A scream that came from the depths of the patriarch's camp ripped through the air. He tore his own clothes, which was a physical way of showing how his heart was broken. He put on sackcloth, which is the roughest type of clothing for deep mourning. His sons and daughters came together to say empty words of comfort that would never reach the heart of his grief. He didn't just grieve. He lived in his grief, promising to take it with him to the grave. And while one father started a long, dark night of the soul, thinking his son was dead and eaten, that same son was being taken south. With each step of the camel, he moved farther away from everything he had ever known and deeper into the heart of an empire that didn't know anything about his God, his family, or his dreams. He was a slave, with nothing but the visions that haunted his sleep. The question was no longer whether his dreams were real, but whether they could survive the harsh reality of Egypt. The smell of the Nile was the smell of a new, captive life. For a boy who grew up in Canaan smelling acacia trees and the dusty ground, the sensory overload of an Egyptian city was a harsh awakening. In the huge slave markets that were built in the shadows of monuments to gods that people had forgotten about, people were things. Joseph stood on the auction block, chained and on display. His past was gone, and the highest bidder could buy his future. The bright coat was a thing of the past. Now he wore the rough tunic of a slave. The harsh, guttural language of merchants haggling over the price of his life drowned out the echoes of his father's praise. He was no longer a dreamer. He was a piece of property. A man of great size and power stepped out of the crowd of people watching. Potiphar was the captain of Pharaoh's personal guard. He walked with the confidence of someone who lived at the center of Egyptian power. His eyes, which were used to judging character and spotting threats, looked over the line of people for sale. What did he think of this young Hebrew? Was it the flicker of an unbroken spirit in his eyes? A quiet dignity that chains couldn't take away? Or was it the unseen hand of Providence that led a powerful pagan to look at only one chosen vessel? The deal was made no matter what the reason. The silver coins that Joseph's brothers had used to buy him now bought him for an Egyptian master. He had started his journey to the heart of the empire. Potiphar's house was like a world of its own, with complicated rules, strict hierarchies, and fancy hallways that hummed with the quiet efficiency of great wealth. It was a golden cage for Joseph, but he didn't give up hope in this strange and new place. The same spirit that had given rise to prophetic dreams was now doing the most basic of tasks. He learned how to act like a servant, how to speak the language of his captors, and how to live on the estate. But he didn't just do his job. He made it better. He brought a level of honesty to every job, a sharpness of mind to every problem, and a faithfulness that was completely different from the cynical pragmatism of the world around him. And as Joseph worked, something amazing started to happen. The Lord was with Joseph, says the Bible in a very simple way. This was not a secret internal comfort, but a real, visible force that changed his life. He was able to bless everything he touched because God's blessing flowed through his hands. The ledgers he kept were always perfectly balanced. The crops in Potiphar's fields mysteriously got bigger. The servants who worked for him for a short time worked together in a new way and with a new goal. He began to feel an aura of divine favor and a quiet hum of prosperity around him. The everyday tasks of the house became a sign of an unseen power. Potiphar was smart. He was a smart man and a good leader who knew how things worked. He saw how quickly his fortunes changed and knew it wasn't a coincidence. He looked at his young Hebrew slave and realized that the success of his whole house depended on this one man in a way that he couldn't explain. He realized that Joseph was not only good at what he did, but also blessed. This Egyptian official, who worshipped Ra and Horus, had an amazing moment of insight when he realized that Joseph's God was the one who had given him this blessing. It was a huge concession for a pagan master to admit that the Hebrew God was at work in his own home. This acknowledgement engendered trust, which subsequently became unconditional. Potiphar raised Joseph because he saw clear signs that God was with him. The young slave who used to clean the floors was now in charge of the whole estate. He was in charge of all the other servants, the fields, the animals, and the huge treasury of Potiphar's house. The man who had lost everything was now in charge of everything. The scriptures talk about this trust in an awe-inspiring way. Potiphar left all that he had in Joseph's charge, and because of him, he had no concern about anything but the food he ate. Joseph had risen to the top of the household power from the bottom of the pit. He was a slave in name only, but he acted like a master and had only his honesty and God's favor to back him up. But in the fancy halls of power, wealth and status often get a different kind of attention. He was starting to get a look that was both admiring and dangerous, and it was threatening to destroy everything he had worked so hard to build. In the architecture of a life that is getting better, success often builds its own secret paths, where new and unexpected dangers wait. Joseph had finally made his dreams of wealth come true. God's favor was like a cloak around him, and Potiphar, his master, trusted him completely. His careful management made the house, the fields, and the accounts all thrive. The Hebrew slave, who had once been sold for silver, was now a powerful man. His past was a fading scar under the bright Egyptian sun. But in the halls of power that are full of light, the people who are closest to the light often cast the most dangerous shadows. Potiphar's wife, who was in charge of the house, started to keep an eye on him. She didn't just look at him with gratitude for being a good servant. She looked at him for a long time, silently judging him not by his skill, but by his appearance. The Bible says that Joseph was handsome in form and appearance. In this rich and often decadent culture, this made him more of a temptation than an asset. He was no longer just a Hebrew slave. He was something that people weren't supposed to be interested in, something that people wanted to keep a secret. The seduction campaign didn't start out as a storm. It started out as a slow creeping tide. A word that suggests something here, a touch that lasts there, a look that lasted a little too long. These were tests, ways to get to know him better. And when Joseph didn't answer because he was busy with his work, she became bolder and more brazen in her advances. The quiet ideas of the night turned into the loud demands of the day. "Lie with me," she said, and her words were like an arrow aimed at his heart. Joseph thought this trial was much more dangerous than the pit his brothers had put him in. That was a test of how to stay alive when people hate you. This was a fight for the soul against the pull of the inside. The offer was too good to be true, a way to enjoy life, to be part of the power structure, and to make his position in this strange land even more secure. If you said no, you could make a powerful and angry woman angry. But Joseph's foundation wasn't built on the changing sands of chance or circumstance. It was based on something that would last forever. The siege went on day after day. He said no every day. He didn't say no because he was scared or shy. He said no because he was deeply and unbreakably loyal. He made his point with shocking clarity, which shows that he had a conscience that was very sensitive to God's voice. He first appealed to his duty to her husband. He would say, "My master has not kept anything from me except you, because you are his wife." He showed how much Potiphar trusted him. It would be a terrible act of ingratitude to break that trust, like poisoning the well from which he drank. It was a fight for honor, a sign of respect for the sacred bond between a man and his wife, and a master and his servant. But his defense didn't stop there. He dug down to a deeper, more holy base. He looked past the woman and his master, and saw the person who would always be there for him. He asked, with a holy conviction in his voice, "How could I do this great evil and sin against God?" This was the main point. For Joseph, sin wasn't just breaking a rule. It was a personal offense against the God who had saved him from the pit, led him through the desert, and blessed him in this strange land. His relationship with God was not just a vague idea. It was the most important thing in his life. It was very wrong to betray Potiphar, but it was unthinkable treason to sin against God. He would not change his mind. He wouldn't listen to her or be near her. He planned his work so that he wouldn't have to see her, putting up a wall to protect himself from the constant fire of her desire. He knew that integrity isn't just a choice you make when things go wrong. It's something you build up every day through discipline. But a strong desire doesn't just go away when you don't get it. It often turns into something much more dangerous. There was no way to avoid the final fight. She picked a day when the other servants were gone, which gave her a chance to be alone and do what she wanted. She grabbed him by the clothes, and her voice changed from a seductive whisper to a desperate, possessive command. Joseph made a choice at that important moment when his purity was being attacked directly. He didn't fight back. He didn't bargain. He ran away. He ran so hard that he left his outer robe, his tunic, in her hand. This was a part of his identity that he left behind in the hands of his accuser. He had gotten away from the trap, but the hunter was left with proof that the hunt had never happened. A terrible, planned lie was about to break the silence in the empty room. Every day, through a million small choices, you build integrity like a fortress. But even the strongest walls can be broken down by a single, persistent lie. Joseph's quick rise to power in Potiphar's house made him as famous as the Egyptian pyramids. He ran the estate with wisdom beyond his years, and everything he did was blessed. His character was a seal of unimpeachable honor. But in the beautiful halls he now ruled, a snake was curled up in the garden of his success. A silent observer had been watching not his skill, but his form. Not his character, but his beauty. The wife of Potiphar. Her stare was always there, and it was unsettling. What started as suggestive looks across courtyards quickly turned into bold words, whispered in quiet hallways. Every day she gave him her invitation, which was a temptation wrapped in the power of her position. Joseph said no every day. He didn't just deny it out of loyalty to his master, the man who had given him everything he owned. He did it out of deep faith in God. He thought about how he could do such a terrible thing and go against the very thing that blessed him. She didn't want to understand his honesty, and she was determined to get past his devotion. She didn't see his honor as something to be respected. She saw it as a challenge to be overcome. The time she'd been waiting for finally came. It was just another day, and the normal rhythm of the house was going on. But she had made a hole in that pattern. The other servants were sent on errands, and the house was left empty on purpose. Its rich silence became her accomplice. Joseph came in to do his job, not knowing that a trap had been set for him. She took advantage of the fact that he was alone. There were no more quiet hints or whispers. She lunged, her desperation plain to see, and grabbed his outer clothing. "Lie with me," she ordered. At that moment, Joseph had to make an important choice. Staying and arguing would mean staying in the fire of temptation. It could be seen as aggression to fight back. He ran away, which was the only way to keep his honor. He didn't think twice. He left his cloak in her hand, a clear sign that he didn't want to be with her, and then he ran away from the house. He cared more about his purity than his job, his reputation, or even the symbol of his authority. He got away from the trap, but he left behind the one thing she needed to kill him. Her desire, which had been turned down and rejected, quickly turned into a poisonous rage. The woman who had been the aggressor was now very good at making herself look like the victim. She screamed as she held the piece of clothing that had been left behind. She called the men of her house to her, her voice shaking with fake fear. She held up the cloak as proof that it was true, a piece of cloth woven with truth that had now been turned into a tapestry of lies. "Look," she yelled, "this Hebrew was brought in to mock us. He came in here to violate me, and when I screamed, he fled, leaving his garment behind." She used Joseph's ethnicity to make him look suspicious. She practiced her story, holding on to her lie until Potiphar got home. When her husband, the captain of Pharaoh's guard, came home, she didn't greet him like a wife would. Instead, she cried and put on a show of anger. She repeated the accusation word for word, using the cloak as the last piece of evidence that proved her point. The story was simple, believable, and told with the anger of a woman who had been wronged. The news was a shock to Potiphar. He had trusted and raised this slave above all others, but the slave had betrayed him in the most personal and dishonorable way. He lost faith in him. His honor was publicly insulted. The text says that he was very angry. Joseph didn't get a trial, an investigation, or even a chance to defend himself. There was no contest between the word of a wealthy Egyptian wife and that of a foreign slave. The decision was quick and final. Joseph was hit by the rage of a powerful man, which was as quick and final as a lightning strike. He was taken and thrown into the king's prison, a dark hole where people who had angered the state were sent. In the blink of an eye, a single lie can take you from the heights of favor to the depths of a dungeon. The fall was so fast that it made me dizzy. Joseph was once again in trouble, having lost his job and ruined his reputation. His brothers threw him into a pit where family members betrayed him. But this prison, this dark, stone-walled womb of the Egyptian state, what would this place turn into? A scream can end a life. The air in Potiphar's house used to be calm and full of order and honesty. Now it crackles with the poison of a lie. Potiphar, the head of Pharaoh's own guard and a man used to giving orders and making quick decisions, comes home to a carefully staged scene of violation instead of peace. He finds his wife, her voice shaking with planned hysteria, and her hands holding a piece of Hebrew linen. The evidence is not presented with facts, but with rage. A story is made up of a slave's bravery, a virtue that was almost stolen, and a just fight that left only this piece of clothing behind. Potiphar doesn't see a woman who is desperate trying to hide her own sin. He feels that his honor is at risk, that his house is being attacked, and that the foreign boy he trusted so much has betrayed him. The Bible says that his anger was sparked. It was a fire that burned away all sense and memory of Joseph's years of faithful service and the Midas touch that had blessed every part of the estate. At that moment of intense rage, the presumption of guilt was complete. There would be no hearing, no investigation, and no chance for the accused to speak. The master's wife's word was worth more than a slave's silence. In the halls of power, justice is often quick and harsh. The hands that used to run a whole house are now tied. The man who used to walk with authority is now being dragged through the very courtyards he used to command, a sight of sudden destruction. The other servants' whispers follow him. They're a mix of pity, fear, and maybe even cruel pleasure. He loses his power, his nice clothes, and even his name. He is once again just a piece of property, but this time it's broken. The fall is dizzying. It goes from the top of the social ladder to the very bottom. He had risen from being a slave to being almost like a son, which showed his good character and God's favor. Now that rise is gone in a flash. He is a branded criminal, a warning story, and a ghost before he even leaves the estate. He is going to a place where only people who have personally offended the crown can go. This is not a normal jail for thieves and debtors. It is the royal prison, a stone fortress where the king kept his prisoners. This is a place of deeper darkness, a dungeon where political enemies, disgraced officials, and high-level conspirators were sent to be forgotten. It is a place where hope is hard to find, and time itself seems to be falling apart. The air is heavy with the smell of despair and the damp chill of the ground. Here, men weren't just locked up. They were erased from the world, their stories ending in an unmarked grave in the sand. The heavy iron door slams shut behind him, and the sound is horrible and final. Joseph is now a number, a shadow, and a prisoner of Pharaoh. In this forgotten world, where the disgraced and the hopeless whispered, the silence must have been deafening. What happens to a dream in a place like this? What time is it now for the sun, moon, and 11 stars? A stone ceiling hides them. Where are the grain sheaves bending in the field? There aren't any fields here, just dirt and rocks. The promises that had kept him going and the visions that had shaped his very identity must have seemed like a cruel joke. A childish fantasy that had taken him from a pit to a prison. He had done everything right. He had shown respect for his master. He had run away from temptation. He had done what his God asked of him, and this was his reward: chains, darkness, and the heavy burden of a false accusation. His destiny, which had once been rising to the heavens, had now crashed to the ground. The dreamer is now sitting in the dark in the deepest, safest prison in all of Egypt, where destinies are supposed to die. He is completely alone, cut off from his past and with no clear future. But the story isn't over yet. The God who makes plans for people does not throw away his threads. Even though this was the end of the story, a new chapter was being written. Joseph was about to meet two other men, servants of the king, whose own troubled sleep would soon need the help of a dreamer who had been forgotten. Can a dungeon turn into a dominion? Can stone walls that are meant to break a man's spirit instead be the place where he proves himself? For Joseph, who was thrown into the king's prison because of a false accusation, the darkness was complete. This was not a normal jail for small-time criminals. It was a place for the state's outcasts, for officials and courtiers who had lost the royal favor that had once made them so important. The air was full of the ghosts of ambition, and the silence of men whose voices used to command respect was thick. Hope died here, lost in the sound of water dripping and chains rattling. He had lost everything again. First, his brothers ripped off his coat of many colors. Now, the power that Potiphar had in his house was taken away by the lie of a woman who was angry. He was a man of integrity, caught up in a story of lies, a proof of truth buried in a grave of wrong. But there is a strong, repeating theme in this young man's life that is always there, no matter what happens. But the Lord was with Joseph, says the sacred text. This was not just a passive presence, but an active, real force, just like in the house of the Egyptian captain. It was a shield against the corrosion of bitterness and a light that no dungeon could put out. Being in God's favor doesn't mean you'll live in a palace. It means you'll be with him in the pit. Joseph's friend was still with him, but he had moved. Heaven saw a vessel being prepared, a leader being forged, not in the halls of power, but in the furnace of affliction. He didn't curse his fate or let the misery around him get to him. Instead, he just was. He worked hard. He was there. He was Joseph. People noticed this quality. The head jailer, a man whose job required him to be cynical and tough, began to watch the Hebrew prisoner. He would have seen hundreds of men broken by this place, their spirits getting weaker every day. But Joseph was different. His movements were orderly, his work was efficient, and he had a quiet dignity that seemed completely out of place. He did the job so well that it seemed like he was from another world. He didn't just follow orders, he took responsibility. He didn't just serve, he made things better. The jailer didn't see a criminal. He saw a man of great character whose inner freedom couldn't be chained. He saw competence wrapped in humility, which is a rare combination that makes people trust you even in the most untrustworthy of places. The jailer slowly gave up his duties and gave them all to Joseph. The text says that the jailer put all of the prisoners in Joseph's care. Picture this. A man in chains is given the keys to the kingdom of the chained. The person who was in prison is now in charge of putting other people in prison. He took care of the daily rations, set up the work schedules, and settled the arguments that always happened in such a bad place. He made sense of the senseless and brought order to the chaos. Joseph made the prison work better by turning it from a messy holding pen into a well-run facility. The main jailer had so much faith in Joseph's abilities that he didn't pay attention to anything that was in Joseph's charge. For all intents and purposes, he was a prisoner warden, a slave governor, showing that true leadership is not based on title or position but on character and divine anointing. Joseph was unknowingly in the lowest place possible, where he was finishing his education in divine providence. He was learning how to run a big business, handle logistics, and manage resources. These were the same skills he would need to one day run the granaries of an entire empire and keep the world from starving. He was showing that the person who is faithful in small things, even in the dark, forgotten world of a prison, will be given a lot of power. He had mastered his dark world, turning a place of punishment into a testament to his unbreakable spirit. But something was about to break up the calm rhythm of his life in prison. Soon, the heavy doors would creak open to let in two new prisoners, men who had been right next to Pharaoh. They would bring with them whispered secrets from the royal court and two troubling dreams that would need an interpreter, setting the stage for Joseph's final dramatic rise. How easy is it for a king to lose favor? It is a light that can warm a man to his core, or a fire that can kill him in an instant. Two men lived their lives in the golden halls of Pharaoh's palace, hanging in that dangerous glow. One was the chief cupbearer, the man whose hands were the last to touch the royal chalice before it reached the lips of the divine king. He was in a position of complete trust, a human shield against poison and betrayal, and a close observer of the throne's worries and whispers. The other was the head baker, an artist with flour and leaven, who made food and comfort for the most powerful man in the world. They weren't just servants, they were ministers in Pharaoh's court, men who walked the halls of power and enjoyed its benefits every day. Their world was made up of fine linen, scented oils, and the calm order of the royal household. It seemed like their future was as sure as the Nile rising. But the orbit of power is very unstable. That certainty was gone in an instant that shook everything. The Bible doesn't say what they did wrong. It could have been a word said out of turn, a momentary lapse in judgment, or the bitter fruit of a rival's jealousy. No matter what the reason was, Pharaoh's anger hit them like a desert storm, fast, complete, and blinding. They took away the cupbearers and bakers' titles and gave them the rough clothes of prisoners instead of their nice clothes. They were thrown out of the royal court and into the dark depths of the state prison, which Potiphar, the captain of the guard, was in charge of. The world they had known, with its complicated rituals and hidden politics, was no longer there. There were stone walls, iron bars, and the suffocating silence of shame instead. Their fall was a clear reminder that in Egypt, it only took a heartbeat to get from the palace to the prison. Joseph walks into this dark scene. It's been years since he was wrongfully imprisoned, years spent in the dull routine of being locked up. But even in this long-forgotten part of the empire, his grace can't be hidden. He hasn't lost his honesty because of despair, and he hasn't let injustice make him less hard-working. Potiphar, the man whose wife had condemned him, still sees the good in his character. He sees a man who can be trusted and a spirit that rises above its circumstances. So, when Potiphar brings these two high-ranking officials to his prison, he puts them directly in Joseph's care. It's a deep irony that a Hebrew slave who was sold and betrayed is now in charge of taking care of Pharaoh's former friends. Joseph is no longer just another prisoner. He is now an administrator in the prison, and his authority is a quiet sign of God's favor that no prison can take away. He brings them food, takes care of their needs, and in doing so, he watches as they fall into despair. For a while, the days blended together, with only the slow passage of their sentence marked by sunrises and sunsets. One morning, though, the air in their cell felt different. A new sadness hung in the air, and a real gloom clung to the stone walls. Joseph saw it right away when he got there to start his daily tasks. Their usual sad resignation had turned into a deep and troubled agitation. Their eyes were far away, haunted by images that could only be seen in the dark theater of the mind. This wasn't the general sadness that comes with being in prison. This was a specific, personal pain. And Joseph, whose heart had been softened by years of pain, felt a compassion that went beyond their different positions. He wasn't just their servant. He was a person who understood the geography of a troubled soul. He stopped, looked at both of them, and then asked a simple but deep question that broke the morning silence. "Why do you look so sad today?" His question broke through their loneliness. They looked at him, maybe surprised that this Hebrew prisoner would notice or even care. Their answer came in a wave of shared anger. That same night, each man had a vivid, scary dream that made them feel bad. The cupbearer had a dream about a vine and grapes, and the baker had a nightmare about birds and baskets. People in the past didn't think of dreams as random thoughts. They thought of them as messages from the gods, signs of things to come, and puzzles that needed to be solved. They would have had quick access to Egypt's best magicians and interpreters back in the palace. But in the cold, lonely space of a prison cell, they were completely cut off. There was no one to untangle the threads of their nighttime dreams. They thought that these strange stories held the key to their futures, and the fear of not knowing was a worse prison than the one made of stone and iron. They were stuck, not only because of Pharaoh's order, but also because they couldn't understand the message that was causing them so much pain. So two scary dreams that came to life in a dark dungeon were now hanging in the air between three men, waiting for an interpreter who wasn't there. Or was he? In the suffocating silence of a long-forgotten prison, fate doesn't come with the sound of a guard's key, but as a troubled whisper in the dark before dawn. It starts with an observation, a simple act of kindness that cuts through the fog of hopelessness. Joseph, who is also a prisoner, sees the shadows that don't stick to the walls, but to the faces of his two companions, the chief cupbearer and the chief baker of Pharaoh. They had lost all of their royal status, leaving only the raw fear of men who were stuck between a king's favor and anger. Their sadness was real, and it was worse than their chains. He goes up to them, putting his own pain aside for a moment. His voice is not that of another prisoner, but of a shepherd caring for a sick flock. "Why do you seem so sad today?" "Why?" he asks. It is a question that lets their fear flow freely. In the dark, they all confess at the same time, their words tumbling over each other. They have had dreams. Each man had a different, vivid, and terrifyingly specific dream. In ancient Egypt, a dream wasn't just a figment of the mind. It was a doorway, a message from the gods. But in this pit of official shame, there was no court magician or professional interpreter to figure out the holy riddles. Their visions were like locked boxes, and the fear of what was inside was eating them alive. At this point, we see a changed Joseph. The proud boy who used to show off his dreams to his brothers is no longer around. In his place is a man who has been humbled by suffering and learned where real power comes from. He doesn't say that he has any special skills. He doesn't see a deal or a chance. Instead, he points away from himself and up to the sky. Don't interpretations belong to God? He says. It is both a question and a very strong statement of faith. He is not giving his own wisdom. He is giving away to the divine. He says to them, "Tell me your dreams." The cupbearer goes first, maybe because he sees a glimmer of hope in Joseph's calm authority. He speaks slowly and carefully as he tells the story. He saw a vine with 3 branches on it. He saw the branches bud, bloom, and then, in a flash, the clusters turned into rich, full grapes. He held Pharaoh's cup in his dream, took the grapes, squeezed their juice into the cup, and then gave it back to the king. Joseph hears not only the words, but also the divine echo that comes after them. There is a clear meaning. A stream of grace flows through the vision. He looks at the cupbearer, and his eyes show that he thinks the verdict is good. He starts by saying, "This is what it means. The 3 branches are 3 days." A pause to let the number sink in. Pharaoh will raise your head and put you back in your place in 3 days. You will put his cup in his hand, just like you used to do when you were his cupbearer. This is a promise of life and redemption. The prison's darkness has just been broken by light, but then Joseph makes a request, a raw and human one that shows how much he hurts. "Please only remember me when things are good for you," he begs. "Be nice to me and tell Pharaoh about me so he can let me out of this house. I was really stolen from the land of the Hebrews, and here I haven't done anything that would make them put me in the dungeon." The chief baker steps forward eagerly, his face lit up with excitement because of the good news. He also has a dream of 3. He had 3 baskets of white bread on his head. There were all kinds of baked goods for Pharaoh in the top basket. But as he walked with this gift, birds flew down from the sky and started eating from the basket on his head. He finishes and looks at Joseph, expecting him to say something similar about being restored. Joseph must have felt a deep sadness. He is a messenger of God's truth, and that truth isn't always nice. He can't change the message or make it less painful. He gives the explanation with a serious tone that makes the air feel cold. "This is what it means," he says in a low voice. 3 baskets are 3 days. In 3 days, Pharaoh will lift your head up and hang you on a tree. The birds will eat your flesh. The same words, "lift up your head," can lead to 2 very different fates. One, a praise. The other was a cruel death. There was a prophecy. There were now 2 paths that could not be changed, and they both started in this shared cell. One man was promised that he would live, while the other was given a death sentence. And after that, 3 men were left alone to count the hours. 3 days. For one, a countdown to freedom. Another thing is a march to the gallows. And for Joseph, the interpreter who stood between them, it was the start of a long wait to see if his own kindness and prophecy would finally be remembered. A single, quiet plea, like a fragile seed of hope planted in the hard ground of a dungeon. This was Joseph's last best chance. He had looked into the souls of 2 men and figured out the divine hieroglyphs of their dreams. He had given them not just an explanation, but also a vision of their future. He asked for something in return, but not money. He wanted to be remembered. He didn't give the chief cupbearer an order. He begged him like a man who had been wrongfully imprisoned. "Remember me when things are good for you," he said, "and be kind to me. Tell Pharaoh about me and get me out of this house." It was a simple request, made in a desperate tone that appealed to the very human instinct of gratitude. He was putting everything on the line for the honesty of a man he had just met, a man who was about to be pulled back into the intoxicating world of royal power. The prison's air got thick with excitement. The world got smaller for Joseph, the cupbearer, and the baker. It was only 3 days long. Every footstep in the hallway and every clang of a distant gate marked the slow, unstoppable march of time toward a foretold end. For the baker, it was a scary countdown to nothingness. The cupbearer had to wait without breathing for help. Joseph kept a vigil of hope, looking at a future he had seen for someone else and praying that it would open up a future for him as well. The prison, which had been a place of dull despair, was now full of the energy of a prophecy coming true. Then it was the third day. The whole kingdom was having a feast, giving people a break and judging people on Pharaoh's birthday. The prophecy Joseph had spoken began to come true with chilling and perfect accuracy as the sun rose over the walls of the palace. Guards came to the dungeon. Their goal wasn't vague. It was personal. They came for two guys. The chief cupbearer was called not to be punished but to be restored. They cleaned him up, dressed him, and brought him back into the bright light of the royal court. Again, he stood where he was supposed to be, and his hand was steady as he raised the gold cup to Pharaoh's lips. The stream of rich red wine was like a river of new life that washed away the stain of his time in jail. Once lost, the king's favor was now found. His world, which had once been a four-walled cage, was now a kingdom of possibilities. But one man was raised up while another was thrown down. The prophecy was like a coin that had two sides. The third day didn't bring a feast for the chief baker. It brought a final, deadly decision. He was taken out of the same prison but down a different path that led to his death. The 3 baskets of bread, which used to be a sign of his high office, now looked like a bad sign for his own death. Joseph saw that his life was taken, which was a clear and public example of pharaonic justice. The 2 prophecies, which were spoken at the same time, had come true exactly as they said they would. Joseph's gift was not a guess. It was a clear view of what heaven wanted. The news of the Hebrew slave whose words were true would have spread quickly through the whole prison and soon through parts of the court. Surely his own freedom was just around the corner, but the sweetness of freedom can be a strong painkiller that makes you forget about past hurts and promises. The chief cupbearer, who had been given back his job, was caught up in the whirlwind of court life. He was too busy with the endless ceremonies, the political games, the comforting rhythm of his work, and the intoxicating relief of just being alive to pay attention to anything else. The dungeon's darkness started to feel like a bad dream that was far away, and the Hebrew dreamer who had given him the key to his future and only wanted to be remembered faded from his mind. The wine of celebration drowned out the call for kindness. The promise to talk to Pharaoh was buried under the weight of restored privilege. He didn't remember Joseph. Joseph found the silence that followed to be worse than any accusation. The bright flicker of hope that had been there was quickly snuffed out. Every sunrise was no longer a sign that he might be free. It was a new sign that he had been left behind. Days turned into weeks and weeks turned into months. The memory of the cupbearer's face, which had once been a sign of his freedom, now served as a reminder of how lost he was. Hope that is put off makes the heart sick, and Joseph's heart was left to suffer in the quiet. 2 whole years would go by, waiting for 2 years. 2 years of not talking. He was a man with a divine gift, but he was still a forgotten prisoner, chained not only by iron, but also by the heavy weight of a broken promise. And during that long winter of waiting, he must have asked himself many times, did God forget about me too, like the cupbearer? Time can steal from you, but it can also test you. It was both for Joseph. 2 whole years turned into the dust of the royal prison that no one remembers. The cupbearer's promise, which had once been a bright ember of hope, had long since turned to ash. He had gone back to the sparkle of the court, the wine pouring, and the palace politics. He had completely forgotten about the Hebrew prisoner who had read his fate in a dream. Every morning, the same stone walls, the same routines, and the same deafening silence greeted them. 730 days of waiting is 2 years. For a soul holding on to a divine promise, it feels like an eternity. It is a hard and quiet test of faith that was built on betrayal. How does faith stay strong when heaven seems completely silent? In this crucible of anonymity, the future prime minister's character was being shaped and hardened in a fire of patience that would prepare him for the weight of a nation. Joseph had no idea that his time of being unknown was about to end, not with a quiet pardon, but with a crisis that would shake the kingdom. While Joseph was in prison, Pharaoh, the living god of Egypt, slept in unimaginable luxury. He was the king of the Nile, the judge of life and death, and a man whose every wish became law. His comfort, his orders, and his calm mind were the center of the world. But one night, The walls of his own mind that couldn't be broken were broken. A force much stronger than his armies broke into his sleep and gave him a vision that would haunt him all day. He dreamed he was by the Nile, the big snake-like river that gave Egypt life. From its dark, life-giving waters came a stream of health that was impossible. 7 cows, smooth and fat, came out of the reeds to eat the thick grass along the river. They were signs of wealth and abundance, and their coats shone with the richness of the land. But then the dream turned into a nightmare. 7 more cows crawled out of the same river. These were not animals. They were ghosts of hunger. Their bones looked like they were pressing against their dry hides. They were thin, ugly, and skeletal. They were ghosts of hunger, and they stood next to the healthy cows on the bank. Then something that couldn't happen happened. The 7 skinny cows ate the 7 fat cows in a strange, insatiable hunger. The logic of the dream was scary. The sick ate the healthy, and the empty ate the full. And even after eating them, the skinny cows were still just as skinny and hungry as before. The dream didn't make me feel better. It just made me feel like I had lost something. Pharaoh woke up with his heart racing against his ribs. The dream stayed with him like a shroud. But sleep, whether it was kind or cruel, pulled him back under and gave him a second, parallel vision. This time, he only saw 1 stalk of grain. 7 heads grew from it, plump and golden, full of the promise of a big harvest. They were perfect, like a farmer's prayer come true. Then 7 more heads of grain grew up after them. But these were thin, dry, and burned by a strong desert wind. They were ghosts that were very fragile and were the cause of crop failure. And the nightmare pattern happened again just like before. The 7 heads of grain that were thin ate the 7 heads that were full and healthy. When the sun rose over Egypt, it found the king in a lot of trouble. This was not a normal nightmare. It was a message, a divine puzzle that stirred in his soul. He could move armies and build monuments with his power, but it was completely useless against the terror in his own mind. He quickly called for the smartest people in his kingdom, the magicians, sorcerers, wise men, and diviners of Egypt. They brought their scrolls, star charts, secret spells, and centuries of knowledge. Pharaoh, his voice heavy with worry, told the story of the night visions, the fat and the thin, the plump and the dry. He put the scary puzzle in front of them, hoping they would figure it out. But the smartest people in the most advanced civilization on Earth didn't say anything. They read their books and talk to each other in whispers, but they couldn't figure out what it meant. The royal court, which was the center of all earthly power, was frozen. A godly riddle had been given, and the empire's collective wisdom had failed. The throne room of the most powerful man on Earth went very quiet, and everyone was scared. Who in all of Egypt could possibly understand the bad dreams of a god? He was the most powerful man on Earth, but his mind was too strong for him. Before the first rays of Amun-Ra rose over the eastern horizon and bathed the temples of Memphis in liquid gold, there was already a deep sense of unease in the royal palace. It was a coldness that had nothing to do with the air before dawn. It was the chill of a vision that stuck to Pharaoh like a burial shroud, a ghostly remnant of a world that had been turned upside down. The night had not brought any rest, just a stream of disturbing images, of life being eaten by death and of plenty being eaten by emptiness. This wasn't just a normal nightmare that happened because of a big meal or a guilty conscience. This was different. It felt like heaven. A message had been sent, written in the strange language of dreams, and it weighed heavily on the king's soul. The order had been given by morning, and it rang out through the white halls and wide courtyards. Couriers were sent out with a sense of urgency that spread throughout the capital, creating a palpable tension that made everyone in the court on edge. The pharaoh called the people who knew Egypt's sacred secrets. The magicians, scribes, and astrologers came in a line. They were the smartest and most spiritual people in a civilization that charted the stars and said they could hear the gods' whispers. These were the Chartamim, the people who carved hieroglyphs and were experts in rituals and spells. Along with them came the Chakamim, or wise men, whose advice had helped the state stay prosperous for generations. They were the nation's spiritual firewall, the people who could read omens, and the men who kept the kingdom's order from falling into chaos. They walked into the big throne room with the calm confidence of men who had spent their whole lives figuring out what the heavens wanted. They had seen all kinds of signs, but they had never seen their king, the living Horus. So clearly shaken, Pharaoh told them about the visions that had taken away his peace while he sat on his throne of cedar and gold. His voice, which was usually loud and commanding, now had a thread of desperate weakness running through it. He talked about the Nile, which was the lifeblood of their world, and the 7 cows that came out of its waters. These cows were very healthy and beautiful, and they were symbols of wealth. The court listened and nodded at the familiar good images, but then the story changed. He talked about the 7 other people who came after him. They were thin and sickly, like ghosts of famine rising from the same river that gave life. As he told the impossible climax, the air in the room became still. He said that the sickly cows ate the healthy ones, but stayed as thin as before. He then talked about the second dream, which was like the first one, but with 7 fat, golden ears of grain on a single stalk. These ears were eaten by 7 dry ears that were burned by the harsh east wind. Nature had turned itself upside down. The smaller had eaten the larger. Emptiness had erased life, and it seemed like the laws of existence had stopped working while he slept. The group fell into a deep silence. This was their goal, and the most important time for them. They opened their papyrus scrolls and ran their fingers over the lines of old writing. They looked at their charts, their almanacs of how the stars move, and their lists of known symbols. As they looked through their huge libraries of strange knowledge, whispers turned into quiet arguments. But the symbols fought back. The images were too harsh, too basic, and too resistant to the way they usually thought about things. In their holy books, there was no mention of a cow eating another cow. The meaning stayed hidden, wrapped in a divine mystery that their human minds couldn't understand. The greatest minds in Egypt looked up from their scrolls one by one. Their faces were not full of insight, but of deep and embarrassing confusion. Their spells turned to dust on their lips. Their knowledge had reached its limit. The failure was complete and total, and the results were terrible. The throne room, which used to be a sign of unshakable power, was now a place where people felt powerless. The wise men's confusion turned into a quiet panic that spread to everyone in the court. Egypt's stability was based on more than just its military strength and agricultural surplus. It was based on a sacred promise. Pharaoh, their god-king, was the link between the gods and the people. He kept Ma'at, which is the basic order of the universe. If he had a dream that the priests couldn't figure out, it meant that the gods were talking to him, but people couldn't hear them. The lines of communication to the gods were cut. This one big failure shook the very foundations of their worldview. It was a crisis of faith, knowledge, and power, all happening in the deafening silence of a king's unanswered question. With each failed attempt and every wise man who turned away and looked away, Pharaoh's calm began to break down. The crown on his head felt heavier, and the scepter in his hand felt colder. He was the shepherd of his people, but he couldn't see the wolf that was stalking them in his own dream. The worry that started as a small flame in the night had grown into a raging fire in his soul. He was lost in a sea of doubt, surrounded by the useless tools of a kingdom's knowledge. He had called on all the power, wealth, and knowledge of the strongest empire on earth, but it had all fallen short. The kingdom was on the edge of a disaster that no one knew about, and the king was all alone with his fear. In the quiet throne room, where hope was fading, a single memory that had been buried in the mind of a forgotten servant for 2 long years was about to come to light. Memory is a ghost that floats through the mind's hallways. For 2 long years, a promise made in a dungeon had been like a ghost, silent, forgotten, and buried under the daily tasks of serving wine to a god-king. But a ghost was about to speak in a court that was frozen in fear. The throne room of Pharaoh, which was usually a place of order and power, was now a place of quiet failure. The magicians and wise men from the temples of Ra and Thoth, who were the smartest people in the 2 lands, stood in a circle of helplessness. They unrolled their holy scrolls and whispered their spells into the scented air. But the spirit of the dream stayed locked away, and they had no way to get in. The peace of Pharaoh was gone. 2 vivid and terrifying visions had followed him from the world of sleep to the world of wakefulness. The silence of his seers was scarier than the dreams themselves. He could see it in their eyes, the way they looked away, the small shake of their heads and the fake confidence that fell apart when he looked at them with desperation. Egypt's power, which could move mountains of stone and control armies of men, was powerless against a ghost in the night. One of the worried courtiers watched the show with a dawning, terrible realization. The chief cupbearer was back in his golden position, and his life was proof of a favor that had been forgotten. He heard the whispers of failure and saw the storm growing on Pharaoh's face. One word kept coming back to him, bringing back memories he thought were long gone. Dreams. Through the thick dust of 2 years that were easy to remember, a face began to take shape in his mind. It was the face of a young man with a quiet wisdom that belied his chains. A calm and sure voice talking about fates in the dark of a prison cell. And then he felt terrible guilt for breaking his own promise, which was like being in prison. His conscience, which had been numb for 700 days, suddenly woke up and hurt. He had to say something. He stepped out from the gilded ranks, breaking the scene of failure, and bowed low before the throne. The air got quiet. If he spoke now, he would be under scrutiny, and the cupbearer's past was not without its problems. But the urgency of the moment and the heaviness of his guilt gave him a strength he didn't know he had. "Today," he began, his voice steady and clear, "I remember my faults." He wasn't afraid to tell the truth. He talked about the time he and the chief baker lost Pharaoh's favor and were thrown into the captain of the guard's prison. He painted a picture of 2 men who were both in pain and couldn't understand their dreams. Then he showed them the key. He said, "There was a young man with us, a Hebrew, a servant to the captain of the guard." He went on to tell how they had told their dreams to this strange interpreter. He talked about Joseph's strange confidence, not as a magician doing a trick, but as a vessel for a truth that came from a place outside of himself. The voice of the cupbearer brought back memories of the past to the quiet hall. He talked about his own dream, which was of a vine with 3 branches and grapes that were pressed into Pharaoh's cup. And he talked about Joseph's clear and immediate interpretation, restoration in 3 days. Then he told the story of the baker's dream, in which 3 baskets of white bread were eaten by birds from his head. He told the story of Joseph's serious, scary verdict, death in 3 days. And just as he interpreted for us, the cupbearer said, his words hitting home like a gavel, "So it came to pass. I was restored to my office and the baker was hanged." The court was very quiet. The testimony was clear. It was a first-hand account of a power that had succeeded where all of Egypt's knowledge had failed. Pharaoh's eyes, which had been clouded with fear and anger, were now clear with a hint of desperate hope. His experts only gave him silence, but this servant told him a story, an eyewitness account of prophecies coming true exactly as they were supposed to. The source was a slave, a foreigner, and a prisoner who was stuck in the dark. It didn't matter. When an empire is haunted, it will look for an exorcist in any form. The order from Pharaoh cut through the tension like a knife. "Send for him. Bring him to me right away." The order spread out like a wave of sudden, frantic purpose. The guards turned and ran, their sandals slapping against the smooth stone floors. Royal messengers were now saying the name that had been silent for 2 years. They came down from the palace's light into the dark depths of the state prison, where their footsteps echoed down stone hallways to one specific cell. A heavy bar is thrown. A stone door that has been sealed by time and indifference groans open, letting a sliver of strange light fall on a man who has become a creature of the shadows. He has been a ghost in a story that no one remembers. But now the king wants him to come, and fate has come to get him. Time moves differently for a man who is buried alive in the ground. It doesn't march, it seeps. It is not measured by the number of sunrises, but by the slow pain in the joints and the loss of memories. Then one day, out of the blue, time blows up. A key won't turn in a lock that has been left outside. Light, sharp and violent, floods the dark. A life is about to be violently taken back from the depths of Pharaoh's prison, where it has been forgotten. Guards rushed into the cell, their faces showing both urgency and disdain. There is no explanation, just orders barked. Joseph is pulled out of the wet straw, and his eyes have trouble adjusting to a world he is no longer a part of. He had been a ghost for 2 long years, ever since he had to read the dreams of the cupbearer and the baker. He had made a promise but had not kept it, and he had served a life sentence in silence. That silence is now broken. He is dragged through hallways he has only seen in the dark, past people who have never acknowledged that he is there. "Pharaoh has summoned you," is the one phrase that shook the earth and spread up the chain of command. He is not yet taken to the throne. They take him to a room with running water and sharp razors. The dirt in the dungeon is scraped off. He has his long, matted hair and rough beard shaved off his face and head, making him look like a clean, polished Egyptian courtier. It changes quickly, almost violently. They aren't just cleaning his body. They're taking away his identity as a prisoner. They are trying to get rid of the pit and wash away the years of slavery and false accusations. Then they cover him in fine linen, which is so strange to his skin that it feels like a costume for a play he doesn't understand. In just 1 hour, he has changed from a forgotten prisoner into a man who can stand before a god. After that, the walk. Down quiet, cavernous halls lined with alabaster, past tall pillars with the stories of dynasties carved into them. The air, which used to smell like mold and sadness, now smells like incense and strength. Every guard stands still, and every court official's stare is a silent judgment. Joseph, a man whose life had been limited to the 4 walls of a cell, now walks through the heart of the world's biggest empire. This is a place of total power, where one word from the throne can make a man famous or send him to the grave. And he, a former slave with only the clothes on his back and an unusual ability to see the truth at night, is walking toward that throne. He walks into the audience chamber, and the size of the scene is meant to scare and crush the spirit of anyone who comes close. There is gold on every surface, the walls are lined with courtiers and priests whose faces are blank. And there, above everything else, is Pharaoh. He is more than just a king. He is Horus on earth, a living god whose breath is the law of the land. Before him stand Egypt's wisest men, the magicians and sages who had made a name for themselves by solving puzzles. Now, after 2 troubling dreams, they are completely broken. Joseph is shown in this heavy silence. Pharaoh's eyes, which are heavy from sleepless nights and royal stress, are fixed on this stranger. The king doesn't waste time. His voice, which is used to people doing what he says without question, shakes with desperation. He talks about a vision by the Nile where 7 sleek, fat cows come out of the water and are eaten by 7 other cows that are so ugly and thin that it's hard to believe. He goes on to tell about a second dream in which 7 healthy, full heads of grain were eaten by 7 thin, scorched heads of grain that had been withered by the east wind. He had told the smartest people in his kingdom about these dreams, but none of them could figure out what they meant. His spirit, which was that of a god, was troubled. The silence comes back, heavier than before after Pharaoh is done. Everyone looks at the man in borrowed clothes. This is the time. The end of a journey that started in a pit of betrayal. He has come here because of every wrong that has been done to him, every lonely night, and every prayer he has whispered into the dark. He is not a scared prisoner in front of the throne of Egypt. He is a calm vessel. The strongest man on the planet has admitted that he is afraid. And now this Hebrew dreamer, a voice from the dungeons, is ready to speak a truth that will change the course of a nation forever. Power can build monuments to the sky, but it can't make a troubled mind be quiet. Joseph is in front of the most powerful man in the world, a living god to his people. But he is also a man who is haunted by ghosts at night. The air in the throne room is heavy with failure. The best magicians and smartest people in Egypt, a country known for its deep understanding of omens and mysteries, are speechless. They gave spells, but not much else. They talked about signs, but they didn't bring any peace. Now everyone's attention is on this young Hebrew slave who was brought up from a dungeon and had just had his chains taken off. He is Pharaoh's last desperate hope. Pharaoh, who is used to giving orders, tells his troubled dreams. 7 healthy fat cows are eaten by 7 thin, ugly ones. 7 full heads of grain are eaten by 7 thin heads, which are burned by the east wind. The questions hang in the air, shining. What could it mean? What godly riddle has been written on the canvas of his sleep? Joseph's answer is a quiet thunderclap that changes the whole room. He says he has no personal power, secret knowledge, or special skill. His first act in front of absolute earthly authority is to give up everything to a higher power. He says in a calm voice, "It is not in me." God will give Pharaoh a favorable answer. With that one sentence, Joseph takes himself out of the picture. He is not a sorcerer selling secrets. He is a vessel, a way for a message that is not his own to get to others. This humility is as strange and shocking to a court based on hierarchy and the exercise of power as the dreams themselves. He says that this isn't about how smart people are, but about how God reveals things. Joseph starts to figure out the mystery now that he has this base. He says that Pharaoh's two dreams are not separate signs, but one message from God that is repeated for emphasis. It is a sign of what is about to happen. He says that God has told Pharaoh what he is going to do. The two visions tell the same story in both the pasture and the field, so there is no way to get it wrong. The 7 healthy cows and the 7 full heads of grain are the same thing. They are 7 years. Egypt is about to have 7 years of incredible abundance. He paints a picture of a country that is more blessed than it could ever have imagined. The Nile will fill with water that gives life, and its silt will make the soil so rich that it will almost burst with life. The harvests will be so big that the granaries will overflow, and the people will laugh at how rich they are. It will be a golden age, a time of plenty and feasting when the land itself seems to sing with abundance. The memory of not having enough will fade, and Egypt's good fortune will make the storehouses groan. But then the tone changes. The poetry of plenty gives way to the bare-bones prose of need. Joseph looks at the other half of the vision, the sickly cows and the bad grain. He says that these are 7 years of famine that will come after the plenty, and this will not be a small problem. There will be a famine of terrible proportions, with a hunger that will never end and will consume everything. The earth will turn to dust, the fields will be empty, and the memory of the great abundance will be completely gone, swallowed whole by the need. The 7 years of plenty will feel like a dream, a whisper that you can't remember in the face of an endless, gnawing emptiness. The land of Egypt, which is the world's breadbasket, will be brought to its knees. Joseph doesn't stop after giving the prophecy. After God reveals something, he gives wisdom. He goes smoothly from being a prophet to a strategist, from interpreting dreams to building a nation. He doesn't leave the king with a scary picture of the future. Instead, he gives him a plan for how to stay alive. He suggests a plan that is both amazing in its scope and logic. Let Pharaoh choose a wise and discerning man to rule Egypt. This man should choose overseers, and they should put in place a national tax of 1/5 of the harvest during the 7 years of plenty. Pharaoh should have the power to gather this grain and keep it in cities as a reserve for the future. This food will save the country and protect it from 7 years of famine so that the land and its people don't die. The plan hangs in the quiet throne room, a lifeline from the most unlikely of places. The magicians made things mysterious. This Hebrew prisoner gives a revelation and a detailed, useful answer. The king has been given a way to get through the coming apocalypse. Pharaoh and everyone else in his court need to think about what they just heard. A slave who says he speaks for God, not himself, gives a warning from God and a master plan. What does a king do when the answer to his biggest fear comes from inside his own dungeon? In the halls of power, silence can be a sentence. A thick silence falls over the throne room of Egypt, thicker than the morning mist on the Nile. The smartest people in the empire, the magicians and sages who talk to the gods, are now ashamed and silent. They had been called to figure out the king's nightmares, which included the riddle of 7 fat cows and 7 lean cows, 7 healthy heads of grain and 7 withered heads of grain, and they had not succeeded. Now the space they left is filled with the quiet confidence of a Hebrew prisoner, a man who was brought back from the dark, forgotten depths of a dungeon. Joseph has not only explained the visions, but he has also made a plan for survival that is so wise and foresighted that the air in the court seems to shimmer with its brilliance. The living God, Pharaoh, the son of Ra, leans forward on his throne. He looks at this foreigner's face. The only thing that makes him look good is the dignity that has survived years of unfair treatment. He doesn't see the prisoner's clothes. He sees the mind that saw not just a problem, but a solution, not just a crisis, but an opportunity. The king turns to his advisors, and his voice echoes with a deep and shocking realization. Joseph's plan was more than just smart. It didn't come from just being smart or politically savvy. It was something else. It came from God. Can we find anyone like this man? Pharaoh asks, breaking the stunned silence. One who has the spirit of God. It is a huge concession. The supreme ruler of Egypt recognizes a power greater than his own gods in an empire built on a complicated and closely guarded pantheon. He sees the unmistakable touch of God in this Hebrew slave, the breath of a spirit he doesn't know but whose wisdom he can't deny. The court officials, who are powerful men with old family ties, look at each other. There is no doubt about it. It is clear that what Pharaoh said is true. The plan is good. The man is very special. There's no denying the moment. Destiny has just revealed itself in the center of the Egyptian empire. Pharaoh looks at Joseph with the confidence of a king who knows he is following a divine order. The choice is made quickly and without a doubt. He won't just follow the plan, he'll make the planner the king. He says, "Since God has shown you all this, there is no one as wise and perceptive as you. My palace will be yours to run, and all of my people will follow your orders. I will only be greater than you when it comes to the throne." The universe is made new in one breath. The chains of a prisoner break when a vizier takes charge. The nameless prisoner is made the ruler of the strongest nation on earth. To make this impossible order stick, Pharaoh does a number of things that will change Joseph's identity forever. He takes the royal signet ring off his own hand. This isn't just jewelry. The king's own signature is the sign of his total power. Joseph can now give orders, make laws, and run the whole kingdom's machinery with this ring. Every document that has his seal on it will have the full power of Pharaoh. Now the man who couldn't speak speaks for the king. Then Pharaoh tells Joseph to take off his prison clothes and put on fine linen robes. The rough, dirty clothes of servitude are replaced by the cool, bright white clothes of the highest nobility. This is a public cleansing, a statement that Joseph is no longer an outsider, no longer stained by his past, and is now a son of the court, pure and respected. Lastly, a thick gold chain is put around his neck. It is a collar of honor, not a collar of slavery. It shines in the torchlight, a clear sign of his new position and a heavy burden of glorious purpose. The slave who sold for 20 pieces of silver now wears a fortune around his neck, which shows how much the king trusts him. The change is finished. The second royal chariot is now showing off the boy who was thrown into a pit. Heralds run ahead of him yelling, "Make way!" To the crowds, a wave of unimaginable honor washes away the dust of the dungeon. The one who was forgotten is now impossible to forget. The dreamer is now in charge of the future of a country. He had the power, the plan, and the authority to do whatever he wanted. But as he looked out over the vast, unknowable cities of Egypt, a bigger problem came to mind. Could one man, a foreigner from a land of shepherds, really control the storm that was coming and make everyone in the civilization do what he wanted? How does one person get a whole country ready for the end of the world as they know it? The dream had been explained, the warning given, and the power given to Joseph. But power isn't a goal, it's a tool. And with Egypt's future in the balance, Joseph couldn't rule from the comfort of a distant palace. The signet ring on his finger showed that Pharaoh trusted him, but the dust on his sandals would show that he was serious. The prophecy had been spoken. Now it was time to get to work. Joseph left the beautiful court right away and began a huge journey, a grand tour of the kingdom he was now supposed to save. His chariot wheels kicked up dust in every province, from the lush, wide delta in the north to the sun-scorched cataracts in the south. He was no longer the boy in the pit. He was the land's vizier. His eyes weren't looking up for help. They were looking out for chances. He met with governors, looked over fields, and set up a network of officers who were loyal and understood how important their job was. His plan, which came from divine insight, was now written down in terms of logistics and the law. The state was to get 1/5 of every harvest, or 1 part in 5. This was a royal tax against the coming darkness. It was an unprecedented act of centralized planning, a staggering organizational feat that would change the economy of Egypt forever. And then, just like the dream said, the years of plenty began. The Nile, that ancient river of life, rose up and covered the ground with a thick layer of incredibly fertile silt. The sun seemed to shine brighter than usual, gently warming the ground and bringing life to it. the land didn't just give its fruit, it overflowed. The scriptures say it produced by handfuls, which is a beautiful Hebrew phrase that means that one seed planted would grow into a stalk so heavy with grain that it filled a man's hand. The extra was not small. It was huge. The harvest turned into a national obsession, a 7-year festival of work. Caravans groaned as they carried wheat and barley from the fields to the cities. The scribes worked hard, their fingers stained with ink, trying to write down the endless bounty on papyrus scrolls. Joseph was in charge of everything, a whirlwind of movement and power, with his mind holding the details of 1,000 moving parts. He ordered the building of huge granaries in every city, storehouses that reached up to the Egyptian sky. This was another smart move by the people in charge. He didn't move all the grain to one place, which would have been a logistical nightmare. Instead, he kept the extra grain in the fortified cities of each region. The city that surrounded the field kept its food. The answer was local, effective, and easy to defend. These granaries quickly turned into cathedrals of grain that were full to the brim. The piles of wheat and barley got so big that they were impossible to describe. Joseph gathered so much grain that it was like the sand of the sea, and he finally stopped trying to measure it. The blessing was so big that even the tools people used to keep track of things couldn't handle it. It was a real grace, a physical sign of God's promise. This cycle of miraculous abundance lasted for 7 years. 7 years of wealth, feasting, and safety in the sun. A whole generation of Egyptian kids grew up with nothing but full storehouses and tables that were always full. Joseph, a Hebrew slave, had become the architect of Egypt's golden age. His plan was finished. There were no stone walls around the kingdom. Instead, there were mountains of grain. He had fought a dream into submission, turning a scary vision into a real way out. The years of eating and drinking were over, the work was done, and the country was at peace, knowing it was ready. But even the biggest granary can't stop the seasons from changing. The world was starting to hold its breath as the first lean shadow fell on the horizon. Joseph's world changed in an instant, from the chains of a prisoner to the signet ring of a king. But in the past, one order was never enough to keep power. It had to be woven into the very fabric of the society it wanted to rule. Pharaoh, a great leader, knew this better than anyone else. Joseph got a job, a title, and a chariot. Now he would have roots. He would get a family, something to hold him to Egypt's throne and its soul. Pharaoh gives him a new name, Zaphanath-Paneah, which is a mysterious title that may mean the God speaks and he lives, or revealer of secrets. It was a name that took away the last traces of the Hebrew shepherd boy and gave him Egyptian prestige. Then came the biggest gesture of all, a wife. But not just any woman. Asenath, the daughter of Potiphar, the priest of On, was chosen by Pharaoh. This was more than just a simple arranged marriage. It was a strong political and religious statement. The Greeks would later call the city Heliopolis, and it was the center of worship for Ra, the Egyptian pantheon's most powerful god. The high priest had a lot of spiritual power and influence, maybe even more than the pharaoh himself. Joseph, the foreign vizier, was joining the most powerful and sacred part of Egyptian power by marrying his daughter. He was now family, linked by blood to the spiritual heart of the empire he was supposed to save. We can only guess how complicated this union must have been. A man who was devoted to the unseen God of his fathers was now tied to a house dedicated to the golden sun. But in this new life, in this strange place, a home began to take shape where a prison cell used to be. The land itself seemed to rejoice as Joseph's plans were put into action. The Nile, that great river of life, swelled with predictable and generous kindness. The 7 years of plenty began, a time of almost magical wealth. Egypt blossomed. The grain didn't come in baskets or carts. It came in waves like a golden tide that threatened to overwhelm the senses. Joseph, the careful manager, oversaw the building of huge storehouses and supply cities that were filled to the brim with grain, which piled up like the sands of the sea. The work was never-ending and the task was huge, but it was a labor of hope, not fear. And in the middle of this national effort to stay alive, a very personal story of healing was happening. Joseph was also successful, just like the land. When he wasn't busy with the ledgers and the granaries, his house was full of a new kind of abundance. Asenath had a son with him, He holds his firstborn child, a small miracle in the arms of a man who has lost everything. Joseph doesn't see his pain continuing in the baby's face. He sees it ending. He calls him Manasseh. The name is a deep statement in Hebrew, a sigh of relief that had been held back for 13 long years. It means God has made me forget. Forget about the ripping of his coat, the fear of the pit, and the pain of his brother's betrayal, which was worth a lot of money. Forget the lies Potiphar's wife told, the cold iron of his chains, and the silence of the dungeon when the cupbearer was free. This wasn't a planned memory loss. It was a miracle healing. It was the grace to let go of the bitterness and let the past become a scar that tells a story instead of an open wound that still bleeds. Joseph found the freedom to live in the present in Manasseh, free from the ghosts of his past. A second son was born not long after. Joseph looked to God, the one who wrote his story, for the name of the child once more. He named him Ephraim. This name was also a testimony, but it had an even deeper meaning. God has made me fruitful in the land of my affliction is what it means. He doesn't call it the land of his power or the land of his victory. Even now, as Egypt's vizier, he remembers. He wears fine linen and a gold chain around his neck. He calls it the place where he suffers. This shows what Joseph is really like. He knew that God hadn't taken away his problems. Instead, he had saved them. He didn't pull him out of the fire. Instead, he met him in it and made an impossible harvest grow from the burned ground. Ephraim was living proof that the worst pain could lead to the best purpose. Joseph was completely healed with the help of Manasseh and Ephraim. He was forgiven for what he had done in the past and blessed in the present. The lonely, betrayed boy was now a husband and father, the head of a new family. His laughter echoed in the halls where he used to be a slave. The 7 years of plenty went by like a dream. It was a time of peace and preparation. His family was whole, and the storehouses were full. But Joseph knew better than anyone that every dream must come to an end in the real world. Only half of the prophecy came true. The years of the sun were coming to an end, and the shadow of the lean years was starting to reach the horizon. For 7 years, the earth had only given. Now it started to work. The last harvest of plenty was brought in, and the last grains were swept up from the threshing floors and locked away in Egypt's huge storehouses. The people of an empire had grown rich from the wealth of a dream, which lulled them into thinking they would always be rich. The festival music, the laughter in the markets, and the hum of people working all the time made it seem like it would never end. But just like the Nile River, time has its seasons. The cycle, which a Hebrew slave had seen in a Pharaoh's troubled sleep, was about to change. The 7 good years were over. The change didn't come with a loud bang. It came with a quiet, creeping fear. It started in the sky, with a never-ending brass-colored dome of blue that lasted for days and weeks. The clouds that once promised rain turned into thin, wispy shapes, like ghosts from a season that had passed. After that, the land itself started to change. The Nile Delta's rich black soil, which is a fertile crescent of life, started to lose its color. The harsh sun made it crack and break, making it look like a map of a broken kingdom. The great river, which was the lifeblood of Egypt, seemed to be getting tired. The flood that came every year and added important silt to the soil was weak and sickly. It lapped lazily at the banks before pulling back, leaving the ground dry and thirsty. The thin cows from Pharaoh's dream had come to eat. The famine was no longer just a prediction. It was real, heavy in the air, and a thief in the night stealing moisture from the ground. The fields that used to be green turned white like bones. The wheat and barley stalks that stood in the few hopeful spots were thin and dry, and their heads had no grain, like empty promises. The famine had started, and it wasn't just a problem in one place. This was a curse on the whole world. The sun that burned the ground in Egypt also beat down on the hills of Canaan. The same dry skies covered the Hittite plains and the land across the Jordan. Stories began to come in from all sides with the desperate caravans. They were about crops that had failed, animals that were dying, and a world that was being eaten up by a terrible hunger. The famine was like a vice that was tightening its grip on all the lands every day. The whole area was a huge, dry cistern, and the people who lived there were stuck at the bottom, looking up at a sky that was empty. The first signs of doubt started to show in Egypt. The people had seen the places where the goods were stored. They knew that Joseph's foresight had kept the grain safe, and there was a lot of it. But living next to such wealth while your own personal stores run out is a special kind of torture. Seeing a full granary won't fill your stomach. The private reserves were gone. They cleaned out the last of the family jars. The quiet worry in the homes turned into a desperate murmur in the streets, which grew into a collective cry, a wave of human need that crashed against the gates of Pharaoh's palace. They yelled, "Bread! Give us food or we'll die. Our kids are starving." They went to their divine king, their Pharaoh, who was the only person they knew who had complete power. He was the link between gods and people, and his job was to make sure that Ma'at, divine order and cosmic balance, was kept. But the world was out of whack, and people were begging him to fix it. In this time of national crisis, Pharaoh shows wisdom that goes beyond his own interests. He doesn't say that Joseph's plan is his own. He doesn't act like he's going to do something amazing or make empty promises. He remembers where his country's salvation came from. His answer is clear, simple, and changes the world. He only points one finger of power at the Hebrew vizier who had been freed from a dungeon, not at himself. No matter how desperate you are, whether you live in a small village or the big city of Memphis, the royal order is the same. Go to Joseph. Follow his orders. Joseph, the rejected brother and forgotten slave, is now the only person in charge of life and death for the most powerful nation on earth, with the full backing of Pharaoh. With a key in hand, he walks toward the huge doors of the granaries. A nation is holding its breath behind him. A sea of grain lies before him, proof that his dream has come true. When the locks turn and the big doors open, a wave of hope rushes out to meet a wave of despair. But the famine's effects go far beyond the horizon, as the hungry people of Egypt start to line up. Hunger is a relentless traveler that will send men from faraway places on desperate journeys to find food and bow before a power they could never have imagined. Hunger is not just an empty feeling. It is there. It is a thief that takes away the strength of men and the laughter of children. It makes the world hollow by taking the color out of the landscape and turning everything into a pale shade of bone and dust. This ghost had been haunting Pharaoh's dreams for 7 years. And now, as Joseph had said, it was no longer a dream. It was the real world for everyone. The famine, a cruel and unrelenting hunter, had crossed the borders of Egypt. It quietly crept across the Sinai, its cold fingers reaching deep into Canaan, where a patriarch named Jacob lived. The land that was once promised, full of milk and honey, had become hard. The earth, which used to be soft and pliable, was now a cracked and broken vessel that only gave dust to the harsh sun. The once great flocks got thinner, and their ribs showed through like harsh patterns on a worn-out tapestry. The laughter of a large family turned into the quiet need to survive. The sky was always a blank, brassy dome in the morning, with no sign of rain or hope of relief. Once, the storehouses were signs of blessing for future generations. Now, they are empty spaces. Jacob, who was now an old man, carried more than just his years in the midst of this growing despair. He carried the ghost of a son who had died, a wound that had not healed in 20 years. And now the very survival of his house rested on his bent shoulders. He watched as his sons, who were the powerful and scary heads of their own clans, became paralyzed by the slow-motion disaster happening all around them. He saw them looking at each other, their faces showing how helpless they were, as if they were about to give up. But then, a whisper came, carried by the dry desert wind from one traveler to another who was in need. It was a rumor that seemed too good to be true, like a mirage in a world that was dying of thirst. They said that Egypt had grain, not just a little, but storehouses overflowing, mountains of it, all managed by one man, a brilliant vizier with the authority of Pharaoh himself. A rumor about life in the land of death. This whisper was enough to wake Jacob up from his sad trance. It lit the fierce protective fire that had always been there for him. He called his sons to him, and the silence of their despair was broken by his sharp, painful scream. "Why do you keep looking at each other?" His voice was more than a question. It was an accusation and a desperate call to action. "Listen, I've heard that there is grain in Egypt. Go down there and get some for us so we can live and not die." And so, the trip was planned. 10 of Jacob's sons would go. Reuben, the firstborn, is weighed down by his past mistakes. Simeon and Levi, whose anger once destroyed a city. Judah, who had suggested selling their brother. All 10 of them. They were no longer the cocky young shepherds who made fun of a dreamer. They were now fathers, and they were afraid of watching their own children go hungry. They got their donkeys ready, collected the little silver they had, and faced the powerful kingdom of the Nile. But one of the 10 was held back as they were about to leave. Ben, the youngest. Rachel was Jacob's only other son. Benjamin was more than just Jacob's youngest child. He was the last fragile link to the wife he loved and the son he had lost. Jacob's heart was still raw and alive with the trauma of Joseph's supposed death. He couldn't stand the idea of another tragedy. He thought he might get hurt, which was a fear that was both logical and very hurtful. If Benjamin dies, Joseph will lose him all over again. So Benjamin stayed behind, a valuable treasure safe from a dangerous world. The 10 brothers set out on their long journey south. They walked across a dying land, their journey a quiet procession of people who were sorry, even though they didn't know what they were sorry for yet. With each step, they moved farther away from home and closer to a fate they couldn't know. They were going to Egypt to kneel before a powerful stranger and ask for the bread that would keep their families alive. They had silver in their bags and a heavy fear in their hearts, not knowing that God was guiding their tired steps. They weren't just going to a granary. They were going to a reckoning, a confrontation with a past they thought was long gone. And in the middle of Egypt, a prince they didn't know was waiting, controlling the winds of famine and fortune, getting ready to see the faces of the brothers who had sold him into slavery. History is a patient builder, putting together moments of impossible irony one stone at a time. For 22 years, it has been working in secret to make 2 very different worlds. In Canaan, it carved the old man's face with lines of guilt and made his sons' hearts heavy with grief. In Egypt, it took a Hebrew slave to unimaginable heights, turning a boy into a prince and a prisoner into a prime minister. The architect's work is done now. Famine, the great equalizer, has sent 10 desperate men on a journey for grain, taking them from their dry homeland to the overflowing storehouses of a foreign power. They came looking for bread, not knowing they were about to see the brother they sold for money. They walk into the governor's court, which is very big and scary. The smell of incense and power fills the air. The polished stone floors reflect light from the high windows, and the walls are covered in hieroglyphs that tell silent stories. The man they know only as Zaphnath-Paneah, the Lord of Egypt, and the only one who can give life to the world is sitting in front of them. He is wearing nice linen clothes, and his eyes are lined with kohl, which is how Egyptians do it. He has a heavy gold chain around his neck. He is a powerful figure who they can't get close to because they don't understand his world. They fall to the ground in front of him because they are humble, and because that is how things are done in that country. 10 men, all with their faces pressed against the cool stone, bowed down at the same time. And in that one quiet act, time stops. The polished floor turns into a field under a Canaanite sun for the man on the throne. The people who are bowing down are no longer desperate beggars. They are the sheaves of grain from a dream that happened half a lifetime ago. A vision that once led him to a dark pit is now coming true in a palace of light. It's them. He knows them right away. Reuben, the oldest, still felt the weight of his own failures on his shoulders. Simeon and Levi, the angry twins. Judah was the one who suggested the sale. He sees them all, worn down by time, hardened by work and worry, but they are clearly the brothers who kicked him out. The sound of his own breathing must have been like a roar in his ears, a storm of shock, pain, and deep, world-shattering vindication. It seemed like the universe hadn't forgotten. God had not forgotten, but when he looks at their bowed heads, all they see is a strong stranger. They don't know the brother they betrayed. Why would they? The skinny 17-year-old dreamer is gone. In his place is a man who is almost 40 and carries the weight of an empire in his posture. He speaks their language, but they don't understand it because he talks to them through the detached voice of an interpreter, which makes it impossible for them to get through to him. Joseph is a storm of memories and feelings inside, but his face is like a stone mask, like an Egyptian lord looking down on foreign merchants. He lets the silence last longer, which makes them more anxious. When he finally does speak, his voice is not kind or welcoming. It is cold, sharp, and full of blame. The interpreter's words hit them like hammer blows. You are spies. You have come to see the land's nakedness and find our weaknesses. The accusation is scary and brilliant. A nation like Egypt, that is very aware of its borders, is likely to be afraid of this. But it is specific enough to need a detailed defense. The brothers, who are already off balance, go into a panic. They stammer and beg, their carefully planned requests for grain forgotten as they fight for their lives. They are no longer customers. They are suspects. The power balance, which was already off, has turned into a chasm with Joseph on one side and them, powerless, on the other. He has them exactly where he wants them, trapped in a web of his own making, and they have to tell him the one thing he wants to know most: how the family they left behind is doing. Have they become different people? And what about his dad? What about Benjamin, his youngest brother? The test has started. The word spies, spoken with the authority of a prince, shatters their world. The accusation echoes in the grand Egyptian hall like a thunderclap in a clear sky. Before this strong man, Zaphnath-Paaneah, Jacob's 10 sons can't say anything. They had come for food, for their lives, and now they were being accused of spying, which is a crime that could get them killed quickly and without mercy. They fall to their knees, the smooth, cool stone a sharp contrast to the panic in their hearts. Their refusal is a flood of desperate words. "No, my lord," they stammer, their voices overlapping as they try to show that they are innocent. "Your servants have come to get food. We are all the children of one man. We are honest men. Your servants are not spies." They give the most sacred proof they have, their family. They have told this story 1,000 times, and it is based on God's promises. But in front of this unreadable Egyptian, it is their only protection. They talk about their father, who is an old man in Canaan, and they talk about their brothers. "We were 12, they say, and the number itself hurts. The youngest is with our father today, and one is no more." The words stay in the air. One is no more. Joseph hears the lie they've been living with for more than 20 years. The casual denial of his existence spoken directly to his face. What kind of storm must have been going on behind his calm face? To hear his own death notice from the people who killed him. He doesn't see any regret in their eyes, just fear for themselves. Time has not healed this wound. It has only buried it. And now he will start to dig up the truth. He stiffens his face and uses the very thing they said to prove their innocence. "It is just as I said," he says, and his voice cuts through their defense. "You are spies, and this is how you will be tested. You shall not leave this place unless your youngest brother comes here." He doesn't use a sword to punish them. He gives them an impossible choice. Then, all of a sudden, there was a scary silence. He takes them all into custody. The 10 brothers are trapped in a dark world for 3 days and 3 nights. A jail. Irony is a heavy blanket that makes it hard to breathe. This dark, suffocating feeling of helplessness is like a bitter taste of a memory they tried to forget. The stone walls of their cell whisper about a different time, a different brother who was left in a pit. Did they think about that day again? To the pleas they ignored, the silver they counted, and the lie they made perfect? For 3 long days, the person who made this test lets their guilt stew in the dark, getting ready for the day of judgment. Joseph comes back on the 3rd day. His behavior has changed. He doesn't act like a cruel dictator. Instead, he acts like a man of principle. "I fear God," he says, and they must have been confused by what he said. A lord from Egypt talking about how much he loves God. He gives them a way to live. One of them will stay behind, locked up in the prison they just got to know. The other 9 will be able to go home with their donkeys full of grain that their hungry families need so badly. But their freedom comes with conditions. Their lives, as well as the life of their brother in prison, depend on their return, and they have to bring the proof. Benjamin, the youngest son. They don't get to choose who stays. Joseph's eyes fall on Simeon, one of them. It's possible that Joseph just picked someone at random, or he might have remembered the face of the person who was the meanest that day. Simeon is taken away in front of their horrified eyes. His hands are tied. There is no way to negotiate or appeal. He is a living deposit, a person who guarantees their honesty. The brothers have to watch, and their own freedom now tastes like ash. Their brotherhood is falling apart, just like they did when they were younger. Joseph gives his last orders after what seems to be the end of the ordeal. He tells his servants to fill their bags with grain all the way to the top, but he gives a secret order that the brothers can't hear. Their silver comes in as the grain does. They should quietly put back all the money they used to buy the grain into the top of each man's sack. It is a confusing act of mercy and a stroke of psychological genius. He is taking care of the family he still loves, but he is also setting a trap. He is sending them home with food and a ticking bomb of fear, as well as a secret that, when found, will look like proof that they are guilty. They turn their backs on the granite city, their minds racing with the impossible task ahead. They don't know that the heaviest thing they are carrying is not the grain for their family, but the silver of a ghost, which is hidden in the dark of their own sacks. The grain from Egypt was heavy, but their secret was even heavier. The 10 sons of Jacob finally saw their father's familiar tents rising from the Canaanite landscape after a long journey. The donkeys were proof of their success because they were carrying food. In a world where people were starving, they had found food, but they had to pay a price that was much higher than silver. One brother was left behind as a prisoner in a foreign country, and they brought with them a demand that would tear their family's fragile peace to shreds. They stood in front of their old father, Jacob, who was bent over not only by age, but also by the many sorrows he had experienced in his long and troubled life. They took the weight off their animals, and then they started to tell their story, or at least the carefully edited version they had practiced on the long drive home. They talked about Egypt, a country that was organized and kept safe by the iron will of a strong leader, who they said was harsh and almost cruel. They talked about how he looked at them with piercing eyes, asked them sudden questions, and made the shocking claim that they were not simple shepherds, but spies sent to find out what was wrong with the land. They told the Lord of Egypt about their family, their old father and their youngest brother Benjamin, who stayed at home. They said that this detail had sealed Simeon's fate. The Egyptian viceroy asked for proof because he wasn't sure. They would keep Simeon as collateral until they brought back the boy who would confirm their story. As the scary news spread through the camp, something even scarier was found. The brothers started to open their sacks of grain so they could store the food that would save their lives. But when the first sack was opened, a piece of metal caught the light. The money pouch was full of the silver they had used to buy the grain. A murmur of confusion spread among the brothers. It might have been a mistake. Then they opened a second sack, then a third, and then a fourth. There was no damage to the payment for each man in every sack. It was right on top of the grain. The air was full of fear. This was not a small mistake. In their minds full of guilt, this wasn't a hidden act of grace. It was the design of a trap. The weird Egyptian king wasn't just strict. He was also smart. He had planned this so that when they came back, he could accuse them of stealing and make them all slaves. Their hearts sank, and a sudden sharp fear took hold of them and their father. But for Jacob, this new fear was just a way to make an old pain worse. His son's words echoed in the empty spaces of his heart, each one a hammer blow against the fragile walls of his grief. His face, which was like a map of his past sorrows, crumpled in new despair. When the patriarch finally spoke, his voice was a raw, broken cry that blamed his own sons, fate, and God himself. "You have taken my children away from me," he cried, the words coming from deep within him. He looked at the 9 sons in front of him, but all he saw were the empty spaces. He whispered, "Joseph is no more," the name a ghost on his lips, a wound that had not healed in 20 years. "And Simeon is no more," he went on, adding to the pain of the loss. "And now," he said, his voice breaking, "you want to take Benjamin." It was an impossible request. Benjamin was more than just his youngest son. He was the last living thing that belonged to Rachel, the wife Jacob loved for decades, a love that had survived death itself. Benjamin was the last weak link to that beloved past. To put him in danger was to put out the last light of his most cherished memories. Reuben, the firstborn, who was always impulsive and wanted to get his place back, stepped forward. He saw how much pain his father was in, felt the crushing weight of the famine, and in a moment of reckless love, he made a vow that he never thought he would have to keep. He promised Jacob, "Slay my own 2 sons if I don't bring him back to you." He said, "Put him in my hands and I will return him." It was an incredible offer, a promise written in the blood of his own children. But Jacob didn't change his mind. Reuben's desperate move couldn't fix a wound that deep. The old man shook his head. He would not change his mind. His resolve was made stronger by the pain of loss. He said, "My son will not go down with you," his voice shaking with a fierce protective love. "His brother is dead and he is the only one left. If anything happens to him on the way, you will bring my gray hairs down to the grave in sorrow." And so, the grief of an old man became a fortress, keeping Benjamin inside and sealing the family's fate. But fortresses can't stop a famine, and love can't turn dust into grain, no matter how strong it is. The day of judgment did not come, it was just put off. Hunger is like a clock that never stops ticking, and its hands were now pointing to midnight in Canaan. The silver coins spent in a foreign country had bought a season of life, a break from the curse of the barren earth. The grain from Egypt had been piled high. But as each sack was emptied, it got smaller and smaller until all that was left was the coarse dust of memory at the bottom. The sound of kids laughing faded away, and the look of want took its place. The famine, which had once seemed far away, was now a ghost at every door and a cold presence at every table. The brothers' fragile wealth was gone, eaten up by the unyielding drought. Jacob felt the grip of scarcity getting tighter in the patriarch's tent. He measured the future of his whole house, his legacy, in handfuls of flour. He looked at his sons' faces, which were hardened by the sun and now shadowed by fear, and broke the heavy silence. "Go again," he said, his voice hoarse from age and worry. "Go back to that land of plenty and get us some more food." His words hung in the air, a simple order for a task that was too hard to do. He talked about their first trip as if it had just been a simple trade of silver for food. But his sons knew better. They didn't just come back with grain. They came back with a terrifying ultimatum that tore their father's heart out. Judah was the one who finally had the guts to say the awful truth, the thing that was keeping them from living. They had turned down Reuben's earlier desperate offer. A new man stepped up now. This wasn't the same Judah who had jokingly said he would sell his brother for 20 pieces of silver. This man had been living with guilt for 20 years, and the harsh truth of their current danger made his conscience sharper. He looked his father in the eye and spoke in a tone that was not defiant, but grim necessity. "The man," he began, his voice low and steady, "the Lord of that land solemnly warned us. He looked into our eyes and made us swear an oath. 'You shall not see my face again,' he said, 'unless your brother is with you.'" Judah let the words sink in. Going back without Benjamin wasn't just dumb, it was like killing yourself. People would think they were spies and liars who had gone against the direct order of Egypt's second most powerful ruler. Judah kept arguing, "If you send our brother with us, we will go down and buy you food. But if you don't send him, we won't go." He was drawing a line in the sand, not against his father, but against the idea that they could somehow change their fate. He was making Jacob choose between two terrible pains: the possible death of his youngest son, or the certain death of his whole family from starvation. Jacob's face, which was like a map of a long and painful life, twisted in pain. "Why did you treat me so badly?" he yelled, his sadness spilling over. "Why did you tell the man you had another brother?" A man yelled at his sons, blaming them for a truth they couldn't have hidden. And at that point of fatherly despair, Judah did the unthinkable. He stepped into the empty space of his father's fear and gave him the only thing he had left that was worth anything: himself. He moved closer to her, his eyes never leaving her. "I will be surety for him myself," Judah said, his voice full of the strength of a holy vow. "You will need him from me. If I don't bring him back to you and set him safely before you, let me bear the blame before you forever." This was more than a promise. It was a very deep act of repentance. The son who had not been able to protect Joseph, Rachel's firstborn brother, now promised to give his own life and soul to keep her last child safe. He was putting himself on the altar of his past failure, trying to make up for a crime that had haunted their family for 22 years. Judah's oath finally made his father give in. Jacob, the father and the one who wrestled with God, gave up. He let out a deep, shuddering sigh, which sounded like a heart accepting what it couldn't change. He whispered, "If it has to be this way, then do this." His voice was heavy with resignation. He told them not to leave without anything. They were to gather a gift for the scary Egyptian ruler from the few resources left in a dying land. The last treasures of Canaan were a little balm, a little honey, scented gum and myrrh, and the best almonds and pistachio nuts. A gift of lack to a lord of plenty. He told them to take twice as much money. The silver they had found should be returned in their bags, and they should also get a new payment. It was a mix of honesty and desperate hope. At last he saw Benjamin. "Take your brother," he said, the words heavy in his mouth. He raised his hands in a last shaking prayer of giving up. "May God Almighty have mercy on you in front of the man, so that he can send back your other brother and Benjamin." Then his voice dropped to a whisper of pure heartbreak. "As for me, I'm sad if I lose my children." The brothers set out again with the best gifts from a broken land and the heavy heart of a father who had lost his son. They went south in a sad caravan, heading back into the lion's den toward an unknown fate. They walked toward the scary Egyptian lord without knowing that the man they were so afraid of was the brother they had hurt so badly. The second trip to Egypt was harder than the first. It wasn't the silver in their hands that made it hard. It was the fear in their hearts. Every step across the burned ground was a prayer and a risk. They brought Benjamin with them, the son of their father's old age. He was the last link to a mother and brother they had lost long ago. They didn't see him as just a boy. They saw him as the key to their survival, a fragile key to the locked granaries of Egypt. When they got there, the city they knew greeted them, but the process they knew did not. They weren't taken to the busy markets or the public storage areas. Instead, the strict steward of the Egyptian lord met them at the gates with a blank look on his face and led them away from the crowds to a beautiful private home. They were hit by panic that was cold and sharp. They had tricked the man into living in this house. The vizier, who had their lives in his hands, lived here. They began to whisper to each other, scared and frantic. This was about the money, the silver that had mysteriously come back into their bags. They weren't being taken to a negotiation. They were being taken to their deaths. They saw themselves in chains of slavery, a cruel and ironic reminder of a crime they had committed 20 years earlier. They ran up to the steward and fell at his feet, their words spilling out in a flood of desperate explanation, a story of an honest purchase and a shocking discovery, swearing their innocence. The steward's answer was a quiet puzzle. He said, "Peace be with you," in a calm voice. "Don't be scared. Your God, and the God of your father, has given you treasure in your sacks." Then, to make the moment even more surreal, he brought out their brother Simeon, who was whole and unharmed. They were clearly relieved, but they were also very confused. What kind of power knew their God in the land of Ra and Osiris? The master of the house arrived when the sun was at its highest point. Joseph. He looked at the 10 nervous people bowing in front of him, and then they found him. Benjamin, the son of his mother. Benjamin had been a memory, a ghost from Joseph's childhood for 22 years. Now he was a man, not a boy, and he looked just like their mother, Rachel. At that moment, the Egyptian vizier's carefully built walls and Zaphnath-Paaneah's stoic face fell apart. A tidal wave of memories, love, and loss so deep it took his breath away crashed over him. His calmness fell apart. He suddenly turned around, his face twisted with anger, and ran to his private rooms. The king of Egypt stood alone against the cold stone and cried. He cried for the years that had been taken from him, for the mother they both barely knew, and for the innocent face that had haunted his dreams. He washed his face, told his heart to stop beating, and came back. The meal was served, but when the brothers took their places, a new wave of shock made them quiet. The Egyptian lord, this strange and strong man, was putting them in their seats himself, and he was putting them in a perfect strange order. At the front was Reuben, the firstborn. Then came Simeon, then Levi, and so on, until Benjamin, the youngest, was at the end of the line. The men looked at each other across the table, their faces pale with shock. How could he know this? It was a secret about their tents that only they knew because of their family's history. It was like this stranger could see right into their souls and read the story of their family. Then the food came, and with it, another planned, disturbing act. It was a great honor to serve food from the vizier's own table. But when the plates were set down, one of them was clearly bigger than the others. Benjamin's plate was 5 times as full of food as any of his brothers. It was a clear sign of favoritism, an echo so loud it sounded like a scream. Joseph watched them with a sharp, analytical eye. He was bringing back the same situation that had broken up their family, Rachel's son getting more attention than Leah's sons. He was holding up a mirror to their past, looking for any sign of the old anger or the green-eyed monster that had once made them kill each other. They seemed to be having a great time with him, eating and drinking and not caring about the test that was about to happen. For the first time in a long time, they felt good inside. The fear was over. They were able to get their brother Simeon back. Benjamin was okay. Grain would fill their bags. They left the next morning with the sun rising, feeling good because they thought the nightmare was finally over. But there was a silver cup hidden in the youngest brother's sack. It was a silent judge of their last and most important test. For a brief moment, the road home seems to be paved with hope. The sun is warm, the sacks are full of grain, and Benjamin, their father's child, is safe with them. The fear that had been with them on their trip to Egypt is finally going away, and in its place is the quiet hum of relief. They have faced the powerful governor of Egypt, done what he asked, and are now coming back as heroes who have saved their families. But the Egyptian landscape is still, and the wind doesn't move the dust on the horizon. It is the thunder of pursuit, a storm that is coming quickly and will break their fragile peace. Joseph's steward, whose face is a mask of stern authority, catches up with them on the open road. The brothers stop their caravan because they are confused. This time there are no niceties, just the sharp edge of blame. Why have you repaid good with evil? Why have you stolen my master's silver cup? The steward's voice breaks the silence. The accusation is ridiculous, like a poison arrow. Steal from the man who had been so kind to them, from the Lord of Egypt who had eaten with them and taken care of them. They immediately protest, a chorus of angry denial. They remind him of how honest they are by telling him that they went all the way back to Egypt to give back the silver they had found in their bags on the first trip. They think their logic is correct and that they are completely innocent. They are so sure that they make a rash and terrible promise. Whoever is found with it shall die, they say, and the rest of us will become my Lord's slaves. This promise comes from a place of trust, but it also brings back memories of a dark time when they had already sentenced a brother to death and sold him into slavery. The search is on, a slow, painful process that turns their bags of life-giving grain into coffins of possible death. The steward begins with Reuben, the oldest. The sack is opened and the things inside are dumped out. Just grain, a group sigh of relief. He goes to Simeon and then to Levi. The tension seems to go down with each cleared brother, but it rises again when the steward's hands reach for the next sack. The men watch, but their bravado fades in the hot Egyptian sun. They are no longer rebellious. They are stuck in a play whose script they can't understand. In the end, there is only one sack left, Benjamin's. The youngest, the most sheltered, and the cause of their father's constant fear. The steward's hands move the rope, and a flash of polished silver shines in the light as the grain falls out. The cup. It sits there, hidden among the grains, a quiet, shining condemnation. A howl of pure despair fills the air. The brothers rip their clothes in one motion of grief. The fabric rips, which sounds like their souls tearing apart. Their promise to their dad is now broken. Everything they planned and promised Benjamin would be safe has fallen apart. This is a nightmare that is much worse than being hungry. This time, though, they don't run away. They don't blame the accused or leave them behind. In a big show of change, they all load their donkeys again and turn back toward the city. They will all have to face the governor's justice together. They are led back into the presence of Joseph, who is very scary, and they fall on their faces in front of him. There is no way to defend yourself or explain the unexplainable. Joseph's voice is cold and full of the disappointment of a good ruler who has been betrayed. He asks, "What is this deed that you have done?" His words cut through their prostrate forms. Then he gives the sentence, which is as sharp and clear as a surgeon's knife. Benjamin, the guilty party, will stay in Egypt as a slave because the cup was found in his sack. The other 10 older brothers are free. They can go back to their father in peace. It is the ultimate test, and it brings back memories of their past. They came back to their father once before with one less brother. Will they do it again? Will they give up Benjamin to save themselves? The room is quiet, and the air is heavy with the weight of their choice. And in that deafening silence, one man gets down on his knees and then stands up. Judah, the brother who first suggested selling Joseph, now steps forward to stand between the lamb and the altar. His voice shakes not with fear, but with the fire of a promise he would rather die than break. There are times when one person's voice can change the course of history and rewrite a generation of pain. The air in the Egyptian viceroy's grand hall becomes heavy and still, full of the weight of Judah's last words. He has given up his own freedom, his own life, and his own life in exchange for his youngest brother Benjamin. He talks about a father's unbearable grief, a promise he can't break, and a loyalty he once betrayed in a very cruel way. This is not the same Judah who, 22 years ago, coldly suggested selling a boy for a few pieces of silver. This is a man who has changed because of regret, a brother who has finally learned how to give up. This is the last, undeniable proof for the man on the throne. The dam of restraint, which took 2 decades of power and pain to build, finally breaks. This real, raw love makes all of your strategic tests, planned questions, and fake seriousness go away. Joseph is filled with a flood of emotions, a lifetime of hidden sadness and desire. He can't stand the gold-plated mask of Zaphnath-Paaneah any longer. He turns around, his voice thick and breaking, and barks an order to his guards and servants. "Get everyone out of here." The command is sharp and hard to understand. The Egyptians, who are used to the viceroy's calm demeanor, look at each other and then back at their master, whose face is now a blank canvas of raw, unfiltered pain. They quickly and quietly leave, leaving the powerful governor of Egypt alone with 11 confused Hebrew shepherds. The doors close, and a sound that echoes off the stone walls breaks the silence right away, a man crying without holding back. It is not the quiet sob of a person of high status. It is the primal, guttural wail of a son who has lost his way. It is the cry of a boy who has been taken away from his father, a slave in chains, or a prisoner in the dark. It sounds like 22 years of being alone, not being understood, and having a broken heart all at once. The sound is so loud, sad and happy that it goes through the thick walls of the palace and echoes through the halls until it reaches the ears of Pharaoh's own family. His brothers are frozen in place, unable to move because they are confused and scared. What has Judah's plea done to this powerful, unpredictable ruler? Joseph finally turns to face them through his tears. The royal Egyptian look is gone. There is just a man in front of them, his face streaked with tears and his shoulders shaking. He has a hard time finding the right words to cross the impossible gap of time and identity. And then, in their own language, the language of their childhood and their father's tents, he says the 3 words that change everything. "Me Joseph, Ani Yosef, shut up." It is a silence that is scarier than any prison and deeper than any well. It is a silence that comes from pure shock. They stare, unable to understand what they see. Joseph? They threw their brother Joseph into a pit and sold him to traders in the desert. The brother whose coat was covered in blood that they used to trick their own father, standing in front of them now dressed like a king. The revelation does not make me happy. It makes people afraid. Their guilt, which has been like a ghost following them around, has suddenly become real. The boy whose dreams they mocked now holds their lives and the life of their entire family in the palm of his hand. They can't talk. They can't even see him. They pull back, their faces pale with a fear that has been building for 22 years. Joseph's heart breaks again when he sees how scared they are. He walks toward them with his hands open to show that he means no harm. "Come close to me," he begs, his voice still shaking but now full of desperate tenderness. "Please." He doesn't see the men who betrayed him. He sees the scared brothers he wants to hug. He says again, "I am your brother, Joseph, the one you sold into Egypt." He names the wound directly, not as an accusation, but as a starting point for a miracle. "And now," he says, seeing their shame, "don't be upset or mad at yourselves for selling me here. God sent me ahead of you to save lives. It changes history in a huge way." He tells them that what they did was just a brushstroke in a work of art by God. Their betrayal was not the last word. It was the first. God, the great weaver of destinies, had taken the threads of their jealousy and cruelty and made a tapestry of salvation out of them. It wasn't a grave. It was a door. The slave caravan was not an end. It was a way to get to a goal. The prison wasn't a punishment. It was a way to get ready. He was sent ahead as a scout for Providence to keep a small group of people alive on earth and save their lives through a great deliverance. Joseph has not given them a sword of revenge, but a bridge of grace. But the question is still there. Can his brothers, who are frozen with guilt, find the strength to cross it? A moment of reconciliation. Restoration is a process. The tearful reunion was just the beginning for Joseph and his brothers. A single hug couldn't fill the gap of 20 years that had been made by betrayal and grief. For a broken family to really heal, they needed a new start, a new home, and a new place to live. Joseph went from catharsis to action after he understood this. He walked up to the throne of the most powerful man on earth, not as a scared petitioner, but as a trusted advisor with a plan to save his people. Pharaoh was happy to hear that his family was coming. In the past, a trusted advisor's happy and stable family was a sign that the gods were on their side and that the kingdom was blessed. The Pharaoh's answer was incredibly kind. He didn't just let them in. He told them to come in. He said, "The best of Egypt is in front of you." He told that royal wagons, which were the empire's official mode of transportation, be sent to Canaan. They weren't just for carrying the old and the young. They were also meant to show a tired old man that the news was true. Royal generosity provided for the journey, new clothes and silver. For the family starving in a barren, famine-stricken land, it was a promise of unimaginable abundance. A river of grace flowing from the throne room of Egypt. Jacob, their father, couldn't understand what they were saying when they came back to Canaan with carts full of grain and hearts full of a truth that was more unbelievable than any lie they had ever told. Joseph is still alive, and he is governor over all the land of Egypt. To the old man, who had been in mourning for 22 years, this sounded like madness. He didn't believe them, so his heart went numb. He had been living with the lie of the blood-stained coat for so long that the truth felt like a ghost. But then he saw them. The royal wagons of Pharaoh were waiting outside his tent. This was real, undeniable proof. The Bible says that the spirit of their father Jacob came back to life. A life force that had been dormant for a long time, buried by years of sadness, surged back within him. The son he had buried in his heart was still alive. The big move started. A group of 70 people, along with their flocks and all their belongings, left the land of promise and headed for the land of their provision. It was a journey from lack to safety, from a past of fighting to a future of coming together. Joseph rode out in his chariot to meet them as they got to Goshen, a fertile area on the Nile Delta. Jacob saw his son there after being apart for a long time, not the boy in the coat with many colors, but a man dressed like an Egyptian god. Joseph fell on his father's neck and cried for a long time. It was the end of a painful cycle, the last time the wound that had bled for a generation healed. Love finally won over the years of silence and the void of supposed death in that hug. Joseph's wisdom was clear in Goshen. He put his family in the best pasture land in the area, where their shepherd lifestyle wouldn't clash with Egyptian culture. They were together, safe and well-fed. The family of Israel would be safe from the famine and allowed to grow in this safe place. Years later, after their father Jacob had died, Joseph's brothers' old fears came back. They were afraid that Joseph would finally get his revenge now that their father was gone. They knelt before him and offered to be his slaves, but they had completely misjudged the man their cruelty had made. Joseph cried when he saw the men who had once thrown him into a pit, and in his answer, he spoke the deep truth that makes his whole story worth telling. The idea that God is behind all human evil. "Don't be afraid," he said to them. "You meant to hurt me, but God meant it for good, to do what is now being done, save many lives." It is one of the strongest statements in all of the Bible. Joseph could see the bigger picture, the divine pattern in the tapestry of his life. The pit, the chains, and the prison weren't just cruel things that happened by chance. They were the work of a divine artist making a masterpiece of salvation. Joseph saw God's sovereign grace, but the brothers only saw their own guilt. This family, which was about to die out, was now living in the rich soil of Egypt. They used their shepherd staffs again, and soon the sounds of newborn babies and animals filled the air. They were a people who were saved, a seed of a nation that was safe. But this land of Goshen, which was once a place of comfort and safety, would change into something else over time. A sanctuary that one pharaoh gives can easily become a prison for another pharaoh who doesn't. Remember the dreamer who saved his kingdom? What if the most evil parts of people were secretly making a pattern of God's grace? The story of Joseph is a great example of this divine tapestry. From our limited view on the ground, we see only tangled knots and chaotic threads. The deep black of betrayal, the cold gray of a false accusation, and the frayed ends of years spent in a dungeon. It looks like a record of human failure, proof of how cruel life can be at random. But from a higher point of view, a hidden weaver is at work. His shuttle moves with a clear, sovereign purpose, weaving the violent colors of human sin into a beautiful design of redemption. The radical truth at the heart of Joseph's story is that God is not just reacting to things. He is using them to bring about a bigger plan. He doesn't make evil happen, but he expertly controls it, using the evil plans of men to carry out his own saving will. The pit, the chains, and the prison cell were all part of God's plan. They were the exact steps that God had planned for Joseph to take, leading him to the exact place where a nation needed him to be. Joseph's life becomes a deep echo of a bigger story that is yet to come. He's the son everyone loves, but he was sold for a few pieces of silver. His own brothers give him up, throw him down, and count him among the dead. He goes down into the depths, where he is forgotten and abandoned, only to be raised to the highest position of power, sitting at the right hand of power. He suffers so that he can become the bread of life for a starving world, even giving grace to the people who sold him. He is a living story, a human shadow of the Messiah, who would one day take the world's greatest betrayal and offer the world's greatest forgiveness. Joseph's journey to understanding this truth, on the other hand, was long and hard. This grand divine plan didn't start in the halls of power. It started in the dust and despair of an Egyptian slave market, where a young man's faith was about to face its first, and maybe most important, test.